Chapter 1460. The power of the Great Formation of Fortune exceeded both Chu Xiu and Meng Xinghe's imagination. This was because the Xinghe loose cultivator had never used this thing ever since it had been developed. Hence, its effects had been calculated. It might be weaker or stronger. However, it now seemed that the Xinghe loose cultivator had underestimated the power of the Great Formation of Fortune. The moment Meng Xinghe activated the Great Formation, Eastern Qi, Western Chu, and Northern Yen simultaneously exploded with a pillar of light that soared to the heavens. The power of the pillar made everyone involuntarily raise their heads to look at it. A burst of power erupted from each of the three pillars of light and gathered above the Tongzhou prefecture. This power was invisible and could not be sensed by outsiders. However, at this moment, the Lord of the World and the Heavenly Soul, who was recovering his strength in the Kunlun Devil cult, looked in the direction of Tongzhou prefecture at the same time. The invisible power of fortune continuously poured into Chu Xiu's body. This power was very gentle and was not as violent as the power of the origin of yin and yang. After Chu Xiu refined this power, he did not feel any backlash at all. At this moment, Chu Xiu had a feeling that his will and spirit seemed to be connected to this world. Farmers planted in the spring and harvested in the autumn. Students studied diligently. The people of the martial arts world were happy to settle debts of gratitude and enmity. They dominated the world. Everyone's emotions were rooted in this land, and everyone was born on this land. All sorts of joys and sorrows, as well as all sorts of joys and sorrows, echoed in Chu Xiu's mind. However, it was like a spring breeze caressing his face, allowing him to perceive these things. It did not cause any backlash to his memories. After an unknown period of time, when Chu Xiu opened his eyes, he was already in the ninth heaven. Meng Xinghe smiled and cupped his hands together. Congratulations to Cult Master Chu for stepping into the ninth heaven and becoming a top expert. When Chu Xiu opened his eyes, the first thing he asked was, "What is the ninth heaven? What kind of power does the nine heavens represent?" Meng Xinghe was slightly taken aback by Chu Xiu's question, but he still answered subconsciously, "The ninth heaven is the pinnacle of power. What else can it be?" As he spoke, Meng Xinghe stretched out a finger, and a flame appeared on it. Just like this flame, it will be extinguished in the wind, it will also be extinguished in the water, but in my hands, it will not be extinguished. The rules of this world make water and fire counter each other, but we, the supreme experts of the nine heavens, control the power of rules and distort the rules, allowing water and fire to fuse and never extinguish. After saying that, Meng Xinghe condensed a ball of water in his other hand. The two of them fused and traces of flames entered the ball of water, causing the entire ball of water to be covered with orange flames. It was an extremely magnificent sight. There was a reason why Meng Xinghe was able to establish the Star River Martial Courtyard. His understanding of martial arts and his understanding of strength could be said to have returned to its natural state. It was very thorough, and his explanation was very clear and vivid. But at this moment, the corners of Chu Xiu's mouth curled into a smile. He really had to thank Meng Xinghe. After stepping into the nine heavens with the power of destiny, he had gained more than warriors who had stepped into the nine heavens through normal means. Perhaps even the ancestors of Xinghe loose cultivators' lineage had not predicted this. "Dean Meng, let's go back. It's time to discuss the problem of the netherworld heaven." When Chu Xiu and Meng Xinghe rushed all the way back to the Kunlun Devil cult, he found that Heavenly Soul had already come out of seclusion, and all the disciples of the Kunlun Devil cult were also on guard as if they were facing a formidable enemy. "What's going on?" Chu Xiu asked. Elder Wei's expression was solemn as he said, "There's news from the South Sea that there's some movement in the netherworld heaven." After discovering the netherworld heaven, Chu Xiu had already suggested the sixth devil palm and the other sects to move inward. At the same time, he had also sent some warriors to monitor the movements in the overseas region from afar. When Chu Xiu stepped into the nine heavens, there had already been some movement in the overseas region. The space portal in the South Sea has been completely opened. A large number of netherworld heavens, Elder Wei did not know what to call them. In the end, he could only say, a large number of netherworld heavens' existences have been dispatched, all the way to the Central Plains. Among them are the 4 great demon lords, and there are also 2 sword cultivators, suspected to be Sword Saint Gu Qingsheng and Sword Emperor Shen Kangwu. No life spirits? Elder Wei shook his head and said, only them, no one else. At this moment, someone suddenly came to report that Dao Master had come to visit. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He knew that Dao Master would definitely come at this time. Let's go and see Dao Master first. In the meeting hall of the Kunlun Devil Cult, when Dao Master saw Meng Xinghe walking out behind Chu Xiu, he was slightly stunned. However, Dao Master thought that Meng Xinghe had also heard the news, which was why he had come. Dao Master said in a deep voice, Cult Master Chu, you should know the news from the South Sea. The invasion of Netherworld Heaven is a great calamity. 10,000 years ago, when the ancient calamity came, we could find a Daoist to protect ourselves. But now, we can't find a second Daoist. The only thing we can do now is to join forces and fight against Netherworld Heaven together. Chu Xiu said lightly, we can resist Netherworld Heaven, but the Kunlun Devil Cult will not accept joining forces. If Dao Master wants to fight against Netherworld Heaven together, then the 3 Pristines Temple must listen to the command of the Kunlun Devil Cult. Dao Master frowned and said, the 3 Pristines Temple has never been in the habit of listening to others' orders. We didn't before, but we can now. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, this is the bottom line of the Kunlun Devil Cult, and it cannot be refuted. If the 3 Pristines Temple really can't accept it, then we can only be alone and fight alone. Although Chu Xiu and the other Daoist experts all wanted to seal Netherworld Heaven, the difference was that Chu Xiu had one more goal than them, which was to deal with the life soul. Therefore, the command of the entire Wuling of the upper and lower realms must be in Chu Xiu's hands. The Wuling of the lower realms was easy to deal with. Even Yi Xiaonan and the old Taoist master, who stood at the peak, would listen to him, but the Daoist experts in the 9th heaven were not so easy to deal with. Dao Master laughed and said, Cult Master Chu seems to have said it the other way around. The only one who will be alone is the Kunlun Devil Cult. Meng Xinghe coughed and said, please forgive me, Dao Master. I have already promised Cult Master Chu to join the Kunlun Devil Cult and listen to the orders of the Kunlun Devil Cult. Dao Master frowned slightly when he heard this. Didn't Meng Xinghe have a grudge against Chu Xiu? Why would he rush to join Chu Xiu? Before Dao Master could say anything, the voice of the world came from outside again. Cult Master Chu, Netherworld Heaven has begun to take action. Are you prepared? When the world walked into the hall and saw that everyone was present, he nodded slightly and said, since everyone is here, it couldn't be better. Seeing the tone of the world, Dao Master couldn't help but ask, have you agreed to Cult Master Chu's conditions? The world coughed and said, currently, the Kunlun Devil Cult is the most powerful. Rather than having the alliance quarrel endlessly, it's better for the Kunlun Devil Cult to take command alone. Chu Xiu spread his hands and said to Dao Master, now, it's up to Dao Master Chu how to choose. Dao Master thought for a while and shook his head gently. For the safety of the lower realm and the Daoist people, the 3 Pristines Temple is willing to listen to Cult Master Chu's command. I only hope that Cult Master Chu won't disappoint us. Seeing that Dao Master agreed so quickly, Chu Xiu was slightly stunned. This wasn't Dao Master's style. If he became the leader of the resistance against Netherworld Heaven and won, it would greatly increase the reputation of his sect in the pugilistic world. Moreover, Dao Master was never the kind of person who was willing to submit to others. However, Chu Xiu didn't say anything else. He just said in a low voice, in that case, let's make a plan first. With our current strength, it's far from enough to deal with Netherworld Heaven. The world looked at Tianhun behind Chu Xiu in surprise. Even you can't deal with those from Netherworld Heaven? Tianhun spread his hands and said, I can deal with them, but do you really think that there are only a few experts comparable to the 9th heaven and Netherworld Heaven? Since the lower realm's pugilistic world could produce me, how do you know that there isn't anyone in Netherworld Heaven who can match me? That person is the one we should be worried about. The world was slightly puzzled. Why were Chu Xiu and Dugu Weiwei so sure that there was someone in Netherworld Heaven who could match them? Also, he felt that Dugu Weiwei's attitude seemed a little strange. The entire Kunlun devil cult seemed to be led by Chu Xiu instead of the leader of the devil cult from 500 years ago. At this time, Chu Xiu's words interrupted the world's contemplation. Everyone, at present, in Netherworld Heaven, there are not only the 4 existences comparable to the 9th heaven, but also 2 more powerful sword cultivators. Their cultivation is even higher than those 4. If we want to deal with them, we need to increase the number of people here. It's not enough now. The world shook his head and said, it was enough before, but since you killed the leader of the Brahmin sect, it's not enough now. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, who said it's not enough? There are many experts in the mortal world and the Daoist. As long as we want to find them, we can always find them. I have the confidence to ask the old barbarian king to come out from the Daoist, but I need you to give some benefits to the barbarian tribe. The world master frowned and said, barbarian tribe? You want to use them? Chu Xiu said calmly, it has already come to this, who cares about the barbarian race or not? We are all in the same boat. Moreover, the barbarian tribe has already weakened to such a state. They are no longer a threat to you. So, what are you afraid of? Meng Xinghe, the world, and the world master looked at each other. Meng Xinghe shrugged indifferently. He had already given the law of providence to Chu Xiu, so he didn't care about the power of the Star River Martial Arts Institute. Therefore, it didn't matter whether the barbarian tribe was weak or strong. In the end, the world master and the world master could only nod in agreement. They were not short-sighted people. Compared to Netherworld Heaven, the threat of the barbarian tribe was not a big deal to them. Chapter 1461. Daoist, in the depths of the south. When the old barbarian king saw Chu Xiu again, he was a little surprised. Aren't you fighting in the mortal world? How come you still have time to see this old man? The old barbarian king knew about the matter of the Daoist and the mortal world. In fact, with the old barbarian king's strength, even if he couldn't refine the heavenly key, he could just casually threaten a big sect and someone would take the initiative to hand over the key to him. But the old barbarian king didn't want to do so, or rather, he had no interest in the mortal world. The roots of the barbarian race were in the Daoist, and they only cared about their own territories. No matter how much the Daoist experts were in the mortal world, it had nothing to do with the barbarians. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, I came here this time because I have an important matter to discuss with you, old barbarian king. Chu Xiu had also told the old barbarian king everything that Dao Venerables and the others knew about the Yellow Springs Heaven. After listening, the old barbarian king suddenly sneered and said, if I say that this is retribution, will you believe me? 10,000 years ago, the martial artists of the mortal world invaded the Daoist, just like the current invasion of Yellow Springs Heaven. The cycle of cause and effect, retribution. Did they ever think that they would also usher in such a day? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, it's not the same. Yellow Springs Heaven is not a place where humans live. Their invasion of the mortal world will also affect the Daoist. You should be able to guess this. The old barbarian king was silent for a moment and suddenly said, what conditions did they put forward? The old barbarian king was a rare wise man among the barbarians. In other words, his way of thinking was very similar to that of the human race. If it was any other barbarian patriarch, perhaps he would have already thought of taking the opportunity to attack the Daoist from the rear to avenge the enmity of 10,000 years ago. But the old barbarian king undoubtedly saw further than them. Although he was angry in his heart, there was no doubt that he would take a stand. However, they could attack, but they, the barbarian tribe, could not do it for free. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, the eastern domain and the southern domain will each give 1/5 of their territories to the barbarians. All kinds of formation materials were traded with the barbarians at normal prices. If the old barbarian king is willing to help, I can also open the passage to the lower realm, and let the barbarians descend to the lower realm to accept the true fire to refine their body. I can guarantee that the strength of the barbarian lineage will greatly increase. Originally, this condition was already the limit of Dao Master and the others. However, Chu Xiu was not afraid of the rise of the barbarians. His only enemy now was the netherworld heaven and his life's soul. Therefore, Chu Xiu told the old barbarian king about all the cards in his hand. Moreover, he also promised him some benefits. Seeing that the old barbarian king wanted to say something, Chu Xiu directly said, "I have already told you all my cards, old barbarian king. So, there is no need to probe further. Although I am willing to promise more to the barbarians, you also know that Tao Master and World Master are already at their limit." The old barbarian king sighed and nodded. He also knew the character and way of doing things of Tao Master and World Master. It was indeed Chu Xiu's limit for him to offer such conditions. "Forget it. This old man will go with you. However, I will be the only one in the barbarian race. The others will not go with you. My barbarian race doesn't have many people left, and we can't afford to lose them." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "No problem. As long as the old barbarian king, a ninth celestial layer powerhouse, took action, it would be enough." The other experts in the lower realm did not lack people. When Chu Xiu came to persuade the old barbarian king, he had already instructed Wei Shiya to mobilize the entire lower realm. On the northern Yan side, Chu Xiu's words carried great weight. On the western Chu side, the moon-worshipping cult and the celestial master mansion were also taking the lead. On the eastern Qi side, the true martial cult and other Taoist sects were also present. In addition, the prestige of Chu Xiu and the eastern Qi imperial court had mobilized almost all the forces. Therefore, when Chu Xiu returned with the old barbarian king, the entire Kunlun devil cult had already been occupied by the experts who had come to discuss matters. The situation in the netherworld heaven was urgent. It couldn't be delayed. Chu Xiu waved his hand. Everyone immediately gathered in the main hall of the Kunlun devil cult square, and waited for Chu Xiu's command. Chu Xiu stood in front of the rootless sacred flame and looked at the dense crowd below. Some were familiar, and some were unfamiliar. Even Chu Xiu could not help but sigh with emotion. Some of these people used to be Chu Xiu's friends, such as Mo Tianlin, Xie Xiaolu, and Fang Qi Shao, who had also come with the whole Sword King city. There were also some who used to be enemies, such as Mu Baishuang and the Chunyang Dao sect leader Ling Yunzi, who had always been against Chu Xiu and formed the demon-killing alliance. However, they had never won against him. Now, these people had gathered here because of the netherworld heaven. They only had one goal, and that was to survive. Chu Xiu might be their enemy, but in the face of the unknown and terrifying existence of the netherworld heaven, they would rather follow the orders of their enemy. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I'm very surprised to see all of you here at the top of the Kunlun mountain." Perhaps some people had thought of flattening this place. But now, we have to unite together to fight against the foreign enemy. I think some people will definitely feel very uncomfortable. Ling Yunzi and the others looked around. They were the ones who felt uncomfortable. If there was a word to describe their current mood, it would be that fate made a fool out of them. Perhaps, even they themselves had not expected that there would be a day when they would gather in the Kunlun demon sect. It wasn't to kill Chu Xiu and annihilate the Kunlun demon sect, but to listen to Chu Xiu's orders. Chu Xiu continued, "However, there's no need for all of you to feel awkward. There's no such thing as an eternal enemy in this world. Today, you and I are standing together, and we're fighting for the entire lower realm, for the entire absolute heaven. 10,000 years ago, during the great calamity of the ancient times, the human race did not perish. Whether it was the Daoist people or the lower realm, there was life and reproduction. Today, it is the same. The future of the lower realm and the Daoist people is in your hands." Right now, Chu Xiu could be said to command the entire Daoist people and the lower realm. He had truly reached the peak. Even Dugu Weiwei of the past had not received this kind of treatment. Dugu Weiwei was only able to make everyone fear him and attack him together. However, he was not able to command so many experts. But at this time, a long speech would only annoy everyone, so these two simple sentences were enough. Today, everyone stood here not to fight for themselves, nor for Chu Xiu, but for the entire lower realm and the Daoist people. In particular, some of the martial artists from the lower realm who came from ordinary sects seemed to have a sense of mission, as if they were witnessing history. Taking out a map, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "The existence of Yellow Springs Heaven crossed the South Sea and entered the 100,000 Mountains. Their goal was the West Chu capital. But in reality, they should be heading for the West Chu Dragon Vein. Previously, I killed these existences from Yellow Springs Heaven in the West Chu Dragon Vein. They came here to steal the power of the Dragon Vein and pour it into the Yellow Springs Heaven. You might not be able to feel the power of the Dragon Vein on normal days, but once the power of the Dragon Vein is stolen, we will be facing a true calamity. The earth will overturn, the rivers will dry up, and floods and droughts will follow. It will even cause the origin chi to thin out. I think no one wants to see that kind of scene. So we must stop Yellow Springs Heaven in the 100,000 Mountains and not let them take a single step into West Chu." This was not Chu Xiu exaggerating, but something he had comprehended after stepping into the 9th heavenly layer of martial immortal. At that moment, Chu Xiu seemed to have merged with heaven and earth and saw the will of this world. He naturally knew what the consequences would be after the power of the Dragon Vein was stolen. With a wave of his hand, tens of thousands of martial artists and Daoist elites left Kunlun Mountain and went straight to the 100,000 Mountains, where the South Barbarian land was located. At this time, in the dense forest of the 100,000 Mountains in the South Barbarian land, the 4 demon sovereigns and 2 sword-wielding martial artists crossed the 100,000 Mountains and headed in the direction of West Chu. One of the 2 sword-wielding figures was a young man, and the other was an old man. The few of them were the same as those who had been resurrected before. Their bodies were gray, as if they were pieced together. But compared with Monk Longtu, some of the details on their bodies seemed to be more detailed. Their appearances did not change much, and they were even 90% similar to when they were alive. Behind them was a majestic army of monster race and demon race. Compared to them, the existences behind them could be considered a group of demons and ghosts. Among those existences, some were humanoid, but their appearances were ferocious and distorted. Some were even half-human, while the other half was bones. There were even some that were half-human and half-beast, or huge beasts formed by a group of bones. There were also some ghosts and wandering souls. These demons had endless netherworld chi overflowing from them. Wherever it passed, it infected the surrounding environment, turning the vitality into the aura of death. Even the flowers and trees withered instantly. It was very terrifying. When Chu Xiu led the martial arts elites from the upper and lower realms to intercept them, he saw such a scene. Those martial artists who had only heard of netherworld heaven but had not seen it with their own eyes all gasped. If these demons and ghosts were allowed to enter the hinterland of the Central Plains warriors, it would indeed be a disaster, a great calamity. Chu Xiu spoke to Tianhun telepathically. "Is that Sword Saint Gu Qingsheng and Sword King Shinkangwu?" Tianhun nodded and said, "That's them." 500 years ago, Gu Qingsheng occupied 6% of the world's swordsmanship, and Shinkangwu occupied 4%. The 2 of them could represent the swordsmanship of the entire martial arts world. The rest of the people, who are not even worth mentioning, are the other swordsmen. Chu Xiu squinted and looked at the 4 demon lords and the others. He suddenly realized something strange. Whether it was the 4 demon lords, Sword Saint, or Sword King, they did not seem to have their own consciousness. There were 2 kinds of existences that had been resurrected 500 years ago. One was like Monk Longtu and Hua Nongyue, who had all their memories from 500 years ago and could think. The other was like the previous Heaven Master, who had completely lost their consciousness. These people could be said to be Tianhuan's trusted subordinates, but they did not seem to have consciousness. They were just puppets. Chapter 1462. The demons in Netherworld Heaven did not have any intelligence. They seemed to only have the purest desire to destroy. The 4 demon venerables and the others seemed to have no consciousness and would only act according to orders. Therefore, at this time, Chu Xiu and the others were standing in front of them, but they did not stop at all. Instead, they went straight to the warriors of the upper and lower realms. They did not set up a battle formation, but they rushed over like a sharp arrow. Jianghu Demon Venerable stood at the forefront. He pointed the blood-red spear in his hand, and his aura was so sharp that it seemed to be able to split mountains and split the earth. Behind him, countless demons and ghosts from the Yellow Springs heaven roared and charged forward. Wherever they passed, the powerful Yin Qi would contaminate everything, causing the surrounding trees to instantly wither like a grayish-white line. Everyone, let's do it. Dean Meng, Dao Master, it's up to you. Meng Xinghe and Dao Master nodded. The disciples of the Star River Martial Arts Academy and Three Pristines Temple immediately unfolded the formation discs around them. The demons from Netherworld Heaven only knew how to kill brainlessly, but the warriors of the upper and lower realms would not do so. When it came to the formation, Three Pristines Temple and Star River Loose Cultivator could be said to be the strongest. Therefore, these two sects were the first to set up the formation. The formation of Three Pristines Temple encompassed heaven and earth. The moment it was activated, the yin and yang of heaven and earth, as well as the power of the 5 elements and 8 extremes, all began to circulate wildly. The formation seemed to contain a world, instantly blocking the demons from Netherworld Heaven and killing them. The formation of the Star River Martial Arts Academy was aimed at their own people. The moment the formation was activated, countless bright stars descended and poured into the bodies of the people present. All the warriors found that at this moment, the speed of the flow and recovery of the genuine qi in their bodies began to skyrocket, which also meant that the power of their attacks would be greater. This kind of auxiliary formation was even more difficult to set up than the offensive formation. The offensive formation only needed to ensure the power, but this kind of auxiliary formation also needed to consider the strength of the warriors in the formation and so on. It was very complicated. On the Netherworld Heaven side, Demon Lord Skycry, who was shrouded in a black robe, stepped forward. The Netherworld Death Chi was woven in his hands, but it did not turn into a formation. Instead, it turned into a formation pattern and integrated into the Three Pristines Palaces formation. Dao Master suddenly found that with the integration of the formation patterns, he could not control the formation. The original power of Yin and Yang and the 5 elements were assimilated into the Netherworld Yin Qi. Not only could it not kill the evil ghosts in the Netherworld Heaven, but it helped them recover their strength. Let's begin. Chu Xiu looked at Tianhun and asked, which one will you choose? Sky Soul raised his eyebrows and said, leave Gu Qingqing to me. That guy was very strong 500 years ago. He had the potential to reach the pinnacle of the 9th sky, but the environment prevented him from succeeding. Now that he has such an environment, I want to see just how strong he has become. After Sky Soul's voice fell, he went straight to Gu Qingqing in Yellow Spring Sky. Boundless dark clouds of devil qi shrouded Sky Soul's body. With one step, the whole world seemed to be under his feet, and a strong vibration broke out in the void. When his palm fell, it was the simplest heavenly demon palm, but the whole void was under his control. The place where his palm fell was the boundless devil's domain. Dao Master and the others looked at Tianhun with a sense of relief. His strength was indeed superior to theirs. Fortunately, they did not make a move at that time. In Yellow Spring Sky, Gu Qingqing looked up at Sky Soul and pointed her long sword to the sky. It was a simple stab, but the boundless sharpness rushed straight up to the sky, like the rising sun. It tore the boundless darkness and tore the area under the heavenly demon palm apart. Although Gu Qingqing's body was no longer human, his power still came from Yellow Spring Sky. But his sword essence was not extinguished. It was still the powerful sword essence that had made Dugu Weiwei bleed 500 years ago. This had not faded. At this time, Dao Master and the others also made their moves and faced their opponents. Although Dao Master and the others were defeated by the 4 great demon lords last time, it did not mean that their strength was inferior to the 4 great demon lords. It was just that they were confused at that time and did not know what to do. So, they chose the most conservative strategy, which was to leave first and then gather the strength of the upper and lower realms to think of a solution. So this time, both sides changed their target. Among the 4 great demon lords, in terms of combat power, Martial Demon Lord was the strongest. His strength was so strong that even the World Lord was not a match for him. So this time, Martial Demon Lord was left to deal with Dao Master. With the various secret methods of 3 pristine palace and Dao Master's strong foundation, there were more ways to deal with Martial Demon Lord. This time, the World Lord faced the Heartless Demon Lord. The Heartless Demon Lord's strength might not be as strong as Martial Demon Lord's, but his fighting style was fierce and fearless. Every move he made seemed as if he wanted to die with his opponent. This kind of madman's fighting style was already difficult to deal with 500 years ago. No one wanted to be an opponent of such a madman. Now that the Heartless Demon Lord had already died once, he had no concept of death. So, his attacks were even crazier than 500 years ago. Heavenly Luo Baosha's body refining technique was also unparalleled in the entire Daoist continent. At this time, the World Lord displayed his indestructible golden body and directly fought with the Heartless Demon Lord. He wanted to see who would be able to last longer. The old barbarian king faced the Heaven-Weeping Demon Lord. Among the 4 great demon lords, the Heaven-Weeping Demon Lord's fighting strength was the weakest. However, he also had the most methods. Formation Dao, Treasure Dao, Divination Dao, and so on. However, although he could use these things in battle, their power was somewhat insufficient. The old barbarian king cultivated the human race's martial arts. He also had a strong physique that was comparable to that of a demon god. He could use his strength to break through techniques. So, he had a certain advantage over the Heaven-Weeping Demon Lord. The Red Lotus Demon Lord was dealt with by Meng Xinghe. Xinghe Lu's cultivator had many secret techniques. Meng Xinghe himself was extremely calm and meticulous. The karmic fire of the Red Lotus had less effect on him compared to the others. Moreover, before the battle started, Meng Xinghe had already asked Mei Qinglian to display the karmic fire of the Red Lotus. After studying its characteristics, he had some confidence in dealing with the Red Lotus Demon Lord. The other disciples of the Kunlun Devil cult also charged forward under Chu Xiu's command. However, Lu Jianghu was fighting while looking at the Red Lotus Demon Lord. Although he was very excited to see the Red Lotus Demon Lord again, he had already noticed that there was something wrong with the Red Lotus Demon Lord's gaze before Lu Jianghu could say anything. It was incomparably empty and indifferent. This was definitely not the Red Lotus Demon Lord in his memory. The one in the netherworld sky is not the sect leader. Lu Jianghu suddenly muttered in a low voice. Chu Xiu was preparing to fight Xianxia. When he heard what Lu Jianghu said, he suddenly asked, "What did you say?" Lu Jianghu slapped a skeleton in front of him away and snorted coldly. Although Patriarch Dugu is a little cold, he would never treat Red Lotus and the others like puppets. 500 years have passed. The current Patriarch Dugu is no longer the Patriarch Dugu from 500 years ago. 500 years is enough to change a person. Lu Jianghu's words were filled with resentment. Perhaps he was unhappy that Dugu Weiwei had turned the 4 demon lords, or rather, the Red Lotus Demon Lord, into puppets that only knew how to fight. However, a strange look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes when he heard this. He suddenly thought of something. At this moment, Xianxia also went straight for Chu Xiu. With a light tap of his long sword, ripples appeared in the void. The sword cut through the sky, passing through time and space, and arrived in front of Chu Xiu. Sword Sovereign Xianxia, a sword grandmaster who was second only to Gu Qingqing 500 years ago. After Dugu Weiwei went to the Daoist, even the Heartless Demon Lord died in his hands. One could imagine that his strength was definitely a level higher than the 4 demon lords. Since stepping into the 9th heaven, this was the first time Chu Xiu had fought. However, this time, he no longer needed to familiarize himself with his power. With a light tap of his finger, the entire world seemed to be divided into 2, one yin and one yang. The 2 extreme powers overlapped and grinded against each other. With a loud explosion, the yin and yang exploded into the void, directly shattering the sword will. The magical power of the worldly millstone was now displayed by Chu Xiu in an incomparably casual manner. One finger was a magical power. At this moment, even the Dao Masters, who were fighting fiercely with the 4 demon lords, could not help but look at Chu Xiu. When Chu Xiu gathered the fate to step into the ninth heaven, they sensed it. However, they did not understand that Chu Xiu had clearly just stepped into the ninth heaven, but his combat power was now a little too strong. In fact, this time, Chu Xiu really should thank Meng Xinghe. Right now, not only had Chu Xiu walked a path different from Dugu Weiwa, but he had also walked a path that no one had ever walked before. Gathering the fate of a world to step into the ninth heaven was something that no warrior in history had ever done. However, Chu Xiu did it, and the benefits it brought him were also unimaginable. What was the peak of the ninth heaven? Meng Xinghe's answer was to let the rules be completely under one's control and turn the impossible into the possible. But now, Chu Xiu's answer was that the peak of the ninth heaven was the limit of this world. The rules themselves were in this world, and they were already powerful enough. Why should he change them? Shen Kanghu's figure moved, and the sword qi around him rolled back, turning into thousands of sword qi that slashed at Chu Xiu. It seemed to cover the sky and the earth, and everything in sight had already been covered by the sword qi. His hands formed a seal, as if he was embracing heaven and earth. The entire void began to burst into waves of ripples, shrinking extremely, and replaying the chaos. Under the furnace of fate, all the sword qi melted. The formation was broken out of the sheath, and Chu Xiu's saber fell. However, this saber was not the ethereal cut, nor was it the devouring sky. Instead, it seemed to use the world as a saber, and it was the strongest saber that contained all the power. The saber momentum was invisible, and so was the saber intent. However, under the saber, the mountains and rivers were shattered, and the sea of clouds was tumbling. The sky was Qian, and the earth was Kuan. This saber of Chu Xiu's was called Qian Kuan. Chapter 1463. Level 9 was a new peak for Chu Xiu. The gap was huge. Compared to the peak of level 8, it was like heaven and earth. Martial arts were still the same martial arts, but when Chu Xiu used them, they were sublimated. Under single slice of the universe, everything was broken. It was like the sky and the earth were turned upside down. But Shen Kanghu's power was not that simple. Chu Xiu had very little information about this person. Chu Xiu had asked Sky Soul before, but the answer he got was that he did not know. 500 years ago, Shen Kanghu rarely made a move. This man could be said to have endured to the extreme, enduring all the way until Dugu Weiwa left the lower realm. Only then did he make a move to destroy the Kunlun demon sect. At this time, although Shen Kanghu's two moves were extremely powerful, Chu Xiu did not feel that Shen Kanghu was very strong. It should be said that Shen Kanghu was only at the level of an ordinary warrior in the ninth heaven. This was too far from the legendary Sword Emperor Shen Kanghu. At least Chu Xiu felt that he had overestimated Shen Kanghu. But the next moment, Shen Kanghu's sword slashed, and the whole world became blurry. It was almost visible to the naked eye. The rules in the space were annihilated, and only a sword air remained. Chu Xiu's single slice of the universe could shatter the universe, but the laws in front of him had already been annihilated. When the saber force came close, it was cut off, as if it had slashed into endless chaos. The sound of the knife and the sword intertwined spread across the land. Chu Xiu frowned. Now, he knew what kind of swordsmanship Shen Kanghu was practicing. Chaos. What he was practicing was the power of chaos. The world was chaos. Life and death were one. Yin and yang were unclear. It contained all power, but it also destroyed all power. Strictly speaking, what Shen Kanghu practiced was not just a simple swordsmanship. It was a kind of martial arts. No wonder Sky Soul said that 500 years ago, Gu Qingxing had taken 6 and Shen Kanghu had taken 4. What Shen Kanghu lacked was not only strength, but also persistence and attitude towards swordsmanship. As Shen Kanghu pinched the sword seal with his hand and used his fingers as a sword, the long sword in his hand split again. However, this time, it did not split into thousands of swords. Instead, it turned into a total of 12 chaos giant swords. Each of them was 100 feet tall. They pierced through the void and flew toward Chu Xiu, nailing him to the ground. Chaotic force encompassed everything, including the laws of space. Under this power, Chu Xiu could not find the direction of the 12 swords at all. He could only allow them to lock him down. The 12 giant swords were like a huge sword formation, sealing off the void, and endless chaotic mist wrapped around Chu Xiu. Under this power, all the laws were sealed. It was as if this area had returned to the ancient times, where no laws could be mobilized. Many of the warriors present saw that Chu Xiu was trapped and seemed to be at a disadvantage. Everyone looked nervous. It did not matter whether they had been friends or enemies with Chu Xiu. Now, Chu Xiu was the leader of both the upper and lower worlds. At this time, if Chu Xiu died or was severely injured, it would be a huge blow to them. However, the warriors and even the heavenly souls of the Kunlun devil cult looked calm. Although Sword Emperor Shen Kangwu was strong, no one believed that their leader would be at a disadvantage in this place. Shen Kangwu held a long sword in his hand. Endless sharp sword aura lingered in the air and gathered around his body. This sword seemed to have gathered all the sharp aura on the battlefield. It turned into a giant sword that was 100 feet tall and slashed toward Chu Xiu, who was trapped. However, the next moment, the entire chaos sword formation seemed to explode, and a huge figure appeared. With his feet on the ground and his head in the sky, Chu Xiu used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. However, it was slightly different from usual. At that moment, Chu Xiu had 3 faces and 4 arms. He also had 3 eyes on his head, which was somewhat similar to an original god. In the past, the original god palace had created an original god according to the state of a perfect creature. Now, Chu Xiu's lawful embodiment of heaven and earth revealed an ancient demon god. Among the 3 faces, one was black and one was white. They represented the demon Buddha and Yin and Yang. In the center was Chu Xiu's face. He had 3 eyes on his head, and a huge Yin and Yang light pillar erupted from his eyes and pierced through the sharp sword aura. Boom, boom, boom. Every step that Chu Xiu took caused the entire ground to tremble. It was as if an earth dragon was turning over. The 4 arms behind him formed seals, but the seals they formed were all completely different. Heaven and earth millstone, creation furnace, Mahavarokana seal, worship of 10,000 demons. Yin and Yang, chaos, Buddha, demon, and creation. All kinds of powers mixed together and violently attacked Shen Kangwu. Long swords formed by the sharpness of heaven and earth appeared around him, protecting him. However, under the impact of this powerful force, they began to break layer by layer. His sewn-up body was contaminated with the power of Yin and Yang, but in an instant, a large piece of his body fell off. He was like a statue that had been torn apart, and the surroundings were full of cracks. The strength of these experts who had been resurrected 500 years ago was indeed shocking. Shen Kangwu's strength could even fight Dao Master one-on-one. However, it was a pity that their weakness was also extremely obvious. They could not be injured. As long as they were injured, a large part of their body would crack, and they would not be able to hold on for long. Against Shen Kangwu, Chu Xiu's side was already stable. It was the same for the others. After changing their opponents and going all out, Dao Master and the others had already gained the upper hand. It had to be said that Dao Master's strength was really stable. Everyone was fighting with all their might, but Dao Master was not flustered at all. All kinds of Dao sect secret skills were thrown at Demon Venerable Jianghu like flowing water, directly causing his body to be covered with small wounds. At this time, as long as Dao Master found the right opportunity, he would be able to completely defeat his opponent with all his might. It was the same for the World Lord. He was more stable than the Dao Lord and had been on the defensive all along. However, the Heartless Demon Lord's fighting style had caused him to suffer quite a bit of backlash and he couldn't hold on much longer. Meng Xinghe, who was facing Red Lotus Demon Venerable, had completely gained the upper hand. Although Red Lotus Demon Venerable's Red Lotus Hellfire was strange, as long as he could defend against her Red Lotus Hellfire, everything else would not be a problem. Old Barbarian King was facing Sky Weep Demon Venerable, who had the weakest combat power. At the moment, the battle was almost over. Sky Weep Demon Venerable's arm had been completely destroyed, and he looked very miserable. As for Tianhun and Gu Qingqing, they were still fighting. This made Chu Xiu feel a little strange. Had Tianhun recovered his strength? Although Gu Qingqing was indeed powerful, and after being resurrected by the Netherworld Heaven, she had a combat power that surpassed most of the Ninth Heaven experts, Tianhun should not have dragged on for so long. At that moment, Shen Kanggu, who was being suppressed by Chu Xiu and whose body was about to shatter, suddenly experienced some changes. His grayish-white skin instantly turned black, and it was filled with dense netherworld-ine aura. It was a power that was different from this world. Even martial immortals who controlled the power of rules could not command this power. Shen Kanggu's body instantly exploded, and countless dense netherworld-ine aura turned into a pitch-black demon sword. It tore the void, tore the rules, and ignored time and space. When it reappeared, it was already in front of Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu's expression changed instantly. He was very familiar with this power. It was the power of the demonic source, but it was the power of the Netherworld Heaven's demonic source. The life soul had grasped the method to split the source and poured a portion of the source power into Shen Kanggu's body. Chu Xiu's 4 arms formed seals behind his back. At the same time, he activated the source power of yin and yang in his body to resist it. However, Chu Xiu could only borrow the source power of yin and yang, while Shen Kanggu's body contained the main body of the source. Although there was only a trace of it, it was still the source. The demon god transformed phenomenon of heaven and earth was torn apart by the source sword. In the end, the yin-yang light pillar in the third eye above Chu Xiu's head bloomed to the extreme. Only then did it completely cancel out the trace of the source power. Chu Xiu heaved a sigh of relief. He had never expected the life soul to have such a move. It was simply using them as human bombs. However, at that moment, Chu Xiu's expression suddenly changed, and he shouted, "Be careful." Only then did he react. Since the life soul had grasped the method to split the source power, did it mean that the others also had the same arrangement? At that moment, the bodies of the 4 demon supremacies began to change. The heaven-weeping demon supremacy's body exploded. Countless netherworld-ine chi weaved into threads and floated in the air. The bodies of the martial combat demon supremacy and the heartless demon supremacy also exploded at the same time. The netherworld-ine chi surged into the threads of the heaven-weeping demon supremacy, eventually turning into lines of formation runes that completely locked Chu Xiu's body. Even if Chu Xiu used the source power of yin and yang, he could not tear it apart. At the same time, the red lotus demon supremacy also destroyed her own body. However, she did not turn into the netherworld-ine chi. Instead, she turned into hellfire. She melted into the formation, and the light of the formation was instantly ignited. At that moment, Chu Xiu felt like he was in the yellow springs of the netherworld. Endless ghost chi burned around him, and he could not absorb any power at all. Even his own power was suppressed, and he could no longer sense any aura or rules in the outside world. Dao Master and the others did not expect that these people, who had been fighting with them so fiercely before, would destroy their own bodies in the blink of an eye to form a formation to target Chu Xiu. It was as if their target had been Chu Xiu from the very beginning. Moreover, they could not stop it even if they wanted to. That was the rule source of another world. Unless they were like Chu Xiu, who also had the source power, there was no way they could stop it by force. Among the existences in the Yellow Springs heaven, only Gu Qingqing did not destroy her own body. However, the netherworld-ine chi that contained the power of the source exploded from the sword in her hand to entangle the heaven soul. At the same time, Gu Qingqing turned into a sword and slashed at Chu Xiu in the formation. Chapter 1464. Gu Qingqing turned into a sword. That was the purest sword Chu Xiu had ever seen. Even Du Gu Weiwei, who had been invincible in the past, had bled under that sword. In that era, there were only 2 people who could make Du Gu Weiwei bleed. One was Ning Xuanji, and the other was Gu Qingqing. Other people practiced sword skills with different elements. Among the sword elites Chu Xiu had seen, there was Shen Kangwu's chaos sword skill, which pointed to the origin of the path. There was also Fang Qi Shao's causal sword skill. It was very magical, and when he practiced it to the peak, he could also see the path. But Gu Qingqing's sword skill was the purest sword skill. It did not contain any elemental power. A sword was a sword, and a sword skill was a sword skill. Fang Qi Shao had asked Mu Baishuang what a sword skill was, but Mu Baishuang did not answer. If Gu Qingqing were to answer, he would say that he himself was the way of the sword. Trapped in the endless netherworld-underworld formation, the aura that belonged to netherworld heaven was constantly suppressing Chu Xiu, making him unable to mobilize any external power. The power of rules had been completely isolated at this moment. Facing Gu Qingqing's sword, Chu Xiu's body was surrounded by the yin and yang power. Chu Xiu used his original power to the max. His third eye shone with a blurry light, suppressing Chu Xiu's body to prevent the original power from backfiring. Right now, the only thing Chu Xiu could use was the power within his body and the yin and yang essence power within his body. All other powers had been completely sealed up. The sword mind was in the air. It was invisible, but it was sharp enough to tear everything apart. The whole sky and earth started to twist as the yin and yang power and the sword air clashed. Chu Xiu used all his power he could, but Gu Qingqing's sword shone even brighter. One sword to destroy a city. The magnificent sword light shone in front of Chu Xiu's eyes. It was as if there were only countless sword lights in this world and only this one sword. Just as the power of yin and yang and the power of the sword gradually dispersed, Chu Xiu's soul actually entered the world enveloped by countless strands of sword qi unknowingly. The expression of the heavenly soul, who had struggled to break free from the netherworld's yin qi, changed when he saw this. Be careful. That was the selfless sword realm. Don't let your primordial spirit fall into it. Tianhuan's warning was too late. Chu Xiu's mind was already immersed in it. The oblivious sword world wasn't a god power or a secret technique. After Gu Qingqing burned all of her power, her sword mind reached the sky. She touched the origin of the world and pulled people into her Yuan spirit world. In this world, swordsmanship was the only rule, and swordsmanship was the only thing that existed. In the last battle between Gu Qingqing and Dugu Weiwei, Gu Qingqing had pulled Dugu Weiwei into the oblivious sword world. Although Dugu Weiwei had only been able to break free for a moment, she had successfully injured Dugu Weiwei and made him bleed. Now, Gu Qingqing had reached the peak of the ninth sky. In the past, she had been able to pull Dugu Weiwei into the oblivious sword world for a moment. Now, how long could she pull Chu Xiu into it? At that moment, in the oblivious sword world, Chu Xiu could see swords. Everything in the world was also swords. This was a world made of swordsmanship. Gu Qingqing stood in the center of the oblivious sword world. She looked indifferent. She waved her hand, and there was an endless amount of sword qi heading toward Chu Xiu. But even if it was just a battle of souls, Chu Xiu would not be easy to deal with. In the past, when he fought with the leader of Brahma, he had consumed the yin and yang soul power that the leader had left behind and refined it. Now, Chu Xiu's heart jumped. Two yin and yang powers came out of Chu Xiu's soul. They turned into two long swords. They were like two yin and yang dragons, and they killed the powerful sword qi that was coming at him. But after a while, Chu Xiu frowned. The situation was not looking good. When he fought with the leader of Brahma, Chu Xiu had pulled him into the 6 paths of reincarnation. He had defeated the leader in a battle of souls. But today, Gu Qingqing had pulled him into the oblivious sword world and used the same method to deal with him. This was quite ironic. Was this karma? Right now, Chu Xiu was using the yin and yang power of his soul to form a sword. He could use a lot of power, but sword skills were not what he was good at. Even if he was good at it, it was useless. In a situation like this, if one's sword skills were not as good as Gu Qingqing's, one would be suppressed. Even if Shen Kangwu was thrown in, the result would be the same. So, Chu Xiu had to use the yin and yang origin power. He tried to block and think of a way to get out of this situation. At this time, in the outside world, the 4 demons were gone. Everyone was free to deal with the other demons in underworld sky. They were completely defeated. Even the formation formed by the demonic source energy in netherworld heaven had been destroyed by the heavenly soul. However, they could not do anything about Chu Xiu, who was within it. Soul fights were the most dangerous. Chu Xiu's soul had been dragged into the oblivious sword world. They could not destroy Chu Xiu's soul, could they? At that moment, Fang Qi Shao, who had been leading the people of Sword King City, suddenly said to Mu Baishuang, faction leader Mu, lend me your broken sword. Mu Baishuang frowned, what do you want? Fang Qi Shao said, Gu Qingqing's sword skills are extremely pure, but the 10,000 swords desolate realm is the real ancestor of sword skills. Their sword skills are also very pure. The broken sword came from the 10,000 swords desolate realm. I can control its power and send it into the oblivious sword world. It can help Brother Chu. Are you crazy? Mu Baishuang shouted, if you were in the 9th heaven, I wouldn't stop you from doing this. But what is your strength now? You just stepped into the martial immortal realm not long ago, and you haven't even stabilized your realm. How dare you interfere at this time? To put it bluntly, you are not qualified to interfere in a fight of this level. Gu Qingqing's sword energy is enough to completely shatter your Yuan Shen. Fang Qi Shao said with a bitter face, I know my strength is far from theirs, but do you have to make it sound so real? It's very painful. But then Fang Qi Shao's expression turned solemn, faction leader Mu, you are now the alliance leader of the World Sword Dao Alliance, and you are on Brother Chu's side. You have already offended the 3 Pristine Palace when you helped Brother Chu to stop the people from 3 Pristine Palace. Brother Chu is now our leader, and he represents our bloodline. Whether it is the Kunlun Devil cult or the forces under Brother Chu's bloodline, we have the common interests. I dare say that if anything happens to Brother Chu, we will all suffer. What happened to the Kunlun Devil cult when Dugu Weiwei left 500 years ago will be what happened to us. So nothing can happen to Brother Chu. We can all die, but Brother Chu can't die. Faction leader Mu, take a good look, who cares about Brother Chu's life other than us? Maybe to them, Brother Chu dying together with these existences from netherworld heaven is the best ending. Mu Baishuang looked up, and his heart sank. They should have won this battle. The experts who resurrected from netherworld heaven had already destroyed their bodies to perish together with Chu Xiu. The other demons, ghosts and evil spirits that came out of Yellow Springs heaven were almost all killed by them. Although the martial artists from the upper and lower realms were also injured, the damage was smaller than they had imagined, and it was within their tolerance range. Without the external threat, some people naturally thought more. The Tao Master and the World Master were silent. Obviously, to them, Chu Xiu's life was not important, and even his death was more in line with their interests. Although Meng Xinghe had a promise with Chu Xiu, it was based on the premise that Chu Xiu was alive and could help him resurrect Yi Weikong. Now, he was thinking. If Chu Xiu were to die, would he be able to seize the yin and yang source from Heavenly Soul? Other than the Kunlun Devil cult and Chu Xiu's good friends like Fang Qi Shao, or people related to the Kunlun Devil cult, the others' minds were no longer on the battlefield. Mu Baishuang said in a low voice, how confident are you? To be honest, I'm not trying to sow discord between you and Chu Xiu, but your talent is rare in swordsmanship. Given time, you will be able to reach the 9th heaven of swordsmanship. Now that you have taken the initiative to enter the sword unique domain to help Chu Xiu, if anything happens, Sword King City will be destroyed, and the World Sword Alliance will have no future. You don't have to throw your life away for the sake of others. Fang Qi Shao shook his head and said, to be honest, I'm not confident at all, because no one knows how far Brother Chu and Gu Qingqing are fighting. However, I only know that I have a way to increase Brother Chu's chances of winning, but I don't do it. That will tarnish my sword heart, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. The old sect leader always told me to consider the overall situation, but I usually don't bother to think so much. Now that I've considered all this, saving Brother Chu is the overall situation. Why are you guys against it? A swordsman would rather break than bend, but it doesn't mean that he won't back down no matter what happens. It's about maintaining a bright sword heart in the face of difficult choices and difficulties. It's about not being twisted and not going astray. Mu Baishuang looked at Fang Qishao for a while, then sighed. He gave the broken sword to Fang Qishao. When Fang Qishao first joined the World Sword Sect, even sect leader Luo Shan thought Fang Qishao was the future of the World Sword Sect. The Daoist hadn't had a genius swordsman like him in a long time. And now, 7th young Master Fang's performance proved that they weren't wrong about him. In the end, they were still together by chance. Unfortunately, Fang Qishao would not listen to their advice and follow their path. Moreover, if 7th young Master Fang were to cower in fear and try to save his own life, then he wouldn't be the 7th young Master Fang that Luo Shan thought so highly of. Chapter 1465. It didn't matter if Fang Qishao's choice was right or wrong. At least if he thought it was right, then it was right. When Elder Wei, Lu Fengxian, and the others heard this, they even bowed to the 7th young Master Fang at the same time with solemn expressions. They were all members of the Kunlun demon sect. Alive, they belonged to the demon sect. Dead, they belonged to the demon sect. If they could increase Chu Xiu's chances of victory, they were willing to stand out. But in this situation, even if they were willing to step forward, they wouldn't be able to help. That was the saddest part. Fang Qishao quickly said, "No, no, no. Please don't. Old Wei, you're so old, and yet you're still bowing to me. That's too much. Also, can you guys not make the atmosphere so sad? It's like I'm going to die. You have to believe in Brother Chu. If he fights Gu Qingqing to a draw, I'll just be the icing on the cake. He'll be able to guarantee my safety. By the way, Sister May, I've never practiced an Essence Soul secret skill before. I'll need your Red Lotus Hellfire to help me activate my Essence Soul power." At this moment, Mei Qinglian couldn't care less about how 7th young Master Fang addressed her. She immediately unleashed the karmic fire of the Red Lotus and enveloped 7th young Master Fang. But this time, the Red Lotus Hellfire didn't disturb him. Instead, it helped Fang Qishao increase his Essence Soul power to the extreme. The next moment, Fang Qishao's Essence Soul left his body and entered the broken sword in his hand. The broken sword shone brightly, and a pure sword mind shot into the sky. It was even more dazzling than when it was in Mu Baishuang's hand. Although Mu Baishuang was stronger than 7th young Master Fang, it was clear that the sword's recognition of 7th young Master Fang was far greater than Mu Baishuang's. The broken sword had been born in the sword realm, in the beginning of the sword path. To the swordsmen of that era, any random swordsman would be purer than the swordsmen of today. They were truly obsessed with the sword to the extreme, which was why they wanted to separate the sword Dao from the many complicated martial Daos, becoming a martial Dao that was truly comparable to Taoism, Buddhism, and fiendish Daos. These people were the ancestors of the lineage of swordsmanship, the true pioneers of the lineage of swordsmanship. When Fang Qishao fused their powers, he could actually fuse them directly into the selfless sword realm. At this time, in the selfless sword world, Chu Xiu was completely on the defensive. The yin-yang sword qi protected his body, resisting the impact of countless Essence Soul sword qi. In a place where only swords could be used, Chu Xiu couldn't do anything to Gu Qingqing, who had been at the pinnacle of swords for 10,000 years. Even if Chu Xiu used his full power, it would be useless. Although he had reached the peak of the 9th heaven in terms of strength, it did not mean that he could do the same in terms of sword principle. Therefore, the only way Chu Xiu could think of now was to delay. Oblivious sword world could not always exist, and Gu Qingqing's power was limited. Maintaining oblivious sword world cost her more than Chu Xiu. So, in the end, Chu Xiu might win without a fight. Of course, the premise was that he could delay until then. In fact, the current situation was not looking good. Right now, the only method Chu Xiu could use was the sword qi formed from the power of yin and yang. He could only defend passively. But at this time, the yin-yang sword qi was getting smaller and smaller. It was only 3 feet away from Chu Xiu's body, and it was being weakened by Gu Qingqing. If this continued, he would not be far from breaking. Right at this moment, a long sword howl resounded from afar, and 7th young Master Feng entered the selfless sword world with the broken sword in hand. Seeing Feng Qixiao appear, Chu Xiu was shocked. "Why are you here?" Chu Xiu thought someone from the outside world would find a way to help him out, but he did not expect that person to be Feng Qixiao. After all, Feng Qixiao had only just become a martial immortal. It was too dangerous for him to get involved in a fight of that level. Feng Qixiao laughed and said, "What? Someone is here to help you, and you don't want to? Brother Chu, I'm very hurt by your attitude." Gu Qingqing noticed Feng Qixiao, too. She waved her hand and sword qi attacked. With Gu Qingqing's power, if the sword qi hit Feng Qixiao, he would have to report to Hades' sky. Chu Xiu moved his hand and the yin-yang sword qi roared out. They stopped in front of Feng Qixiao and brought his primordial spirit next to him. "Stop talking nonsense. How dare you talk nonsense in a place like this?" Feng Qixiao raised the broken sword in his hand and said, "I am really here to help you. You are not good at swordsmanship. You will be at a disadvantage if you fight with Gu Qingqing here. Pour your power into me. I am confident that I can break the selfless swordsmanship with this broken sword from the 1,000-sword unique field." Feng Qixiao was rarely serious, but if he was serious, he would be reliable. Therefore, when Chu Xiu heard him say that, he did not say anything and directly channeled the yin and yang origin energy into 7th young Master Feng's essence soul. TSK, the power of the 9th heaven is so cool, although it is only in the primordial spirit. The 7th young Master Feng moaned comfortably, his face full of enjoyment. However, he knew what he was here for. He immediately channeled the power into the broken sword in his hand. In an instant, a sharp light shone. The powerful and pure sword qi was comparable to Gu Qingqing's. The sword slashed forward, and wherever the sword momentum passed, everything would distort and change. When Feng Qixiao first used the karma swordsmanship, it was only to investigate the opponent's karma. Now, it could distort the karma of various powers. Gu Qingqing's sword qi wanted to stop the power of the broken sword. After Feng Qixiao added the karma swordsmanship, the power began to return to its origin. The karma was inverted. It either turned into the purest power and returned to the selfless swordsmanship, or it was completely distorted, entangled with each other, and finally destroyed. Gu Qingqing used her finger as a sword and gently pointed in front of her. Countless sword qi condensed and finally offset the sword. However, what greeted him next were countless such sword qi. There were not many fancy changes in a fight between swordsmen. There was only the understanding of swordsmanship and the most basic power. Chu Xiu's understanding of swordsmanship was naturally not good, but he had the power. While Feng Qixiao did not have the power, he had the understanding of swordsmanship. He also had the broken sword. The combination of the two was enough to suppress Gu Qingqing. Gu Qingqing's sword qi could no longer fall near Chu Xiu and Feng Qixiao. In the end, even the selfless swordsmanship began to crack, as if it was about to collapse. At that moment, Gu Qingqing seemed to be holding a sword with both hands. She turned into a sword and slashed at the two. She turned into a sword. At that moment, Gu Qingqing and the entire selfless swordsmanship were the extremely sharp and powerful sword. Chu Xiu had already integrated the yin and yang source power and his primordial spirit into Feng Qixiao's body. Feng Qixiao also unleashed all his power at that moment. He waved the broken sword in his hand and slashed forward. At that moment, sword will exploded and even condensed into a physical body. It was a blurry image of a swordsman. It was not Feng Qixiao, but the ancestors of swordsmanship in the sword realm. They had left their images in the broken sword, and in the end, they were triggered by the powerful sword will that Feng Qixiao had unleashed. The two collided, and the endless sword qi danced in the sword realm. All that was left in front of Chu Xiu was a scene of white sword qi intertwining and merging. After some time, the sword chi finally dissipated. Gu Qingqing stood where she was, and her body was covered in cracks. But at that moment, Chu Xiu noticed that Gu Qingqing had changed. Previously, there was only an indifferent look in his eyes. He was simply a puppet without any consciousness. But now, his eyes were as clear as water, and he was even smiling. Chu Xiu wanted to ask him what was going on in Hades' sky and when his life soul would come out, but Gu Qingqing ignored Chu Xiu. She looked at Fang Qi Shao and smiled. With a gentle voice, she said, "You are not bad. Very good. It is a blessing for the swordsmanship to have a junior like you. If you can hold on to your swordsmanship, you will reach the top. But at the same time, I hope that when you reach the top, you will not forget and abandon the swordsmanship you have been holding on to." Fang Qi Shao nodded excitedly. Although they had been enemies before, Fang Qi Shao knew that the one before was not Gu Qingqing. It was just a powerful puppet with Gu Qingqing's strength. Now, the one standing in front of him was Sword Saint Gu Qingqing, who had shocked the world and destroyed cities with one sword. For any swordsman 500 years in the future, seeing Gu Qingqing was like seeing an idol. They were extremely excited. Fang Qi Shao was the same. He was not in the mood to smile. At that moment, Gu Qingqing looked at Chu Xiu. She shook her head and said, "You are not Dugu Weiwei, and he is not." Before she could finish her sentence, the entire sword absolute domain instantly shattered. Gu Qingqing's primordial spirit body also dissipated, drifting in the void. Chu Xiu was speechless. Chu Xiu felt very complicated. He wanted to curse, but there was nothing he could do. Half a sentence again. The previous Heaven Master had also left half a sentence, but that was fine. After all, the previous Heaven Master could not control himself. This person had obviously recovered his senses. As long as he did not praise Fang Qi Shao, he could finish the story. In the end, in the eyes of this sword saint from 500 years ago, it was clear that 7th young Master Fang, a swordsman of the younger generation, was much more important than Chu Xiu, and much more important than the current situation. At this moment, 7th young Master Fang still had an excited expression on his face as he said to Chu Xiu in high spirits, "Speaking of which, being born in the same era as you and Brother Lu, these perverts, is a very stressful thing. The old sect master always uses you guys to scold me. Can't he use a normal person to compare me?" Did you hear what the Sword Saint said? Sword Saint Gu Qingqing praised me. That is Sword Saint Gu Qingqing. Oh no, why didn't he use the shadow recording stone? By the way, we are spirit bodies now. We can't use the shadow recording stone. Seeing Fang Qi Shao's excited look, Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "You can remember this for the rest of your life. Gu Qingqing's words are very precious." Chapter 1466. The selfless sword world dissipated and Chu Xiu and Fang Qi Shao's primordial spirits returned to their bodies. Seeing that Chu Xiu and Fang Qi Shao were fine, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Chu Xiu looked around. The demons in the Yellow Springs heaven had basically been wiped out. He looked at Tianhun and asked, "Are they all taken care of?" Tianhun nodded and said, "As you can see, they're all taken care of." However, Chu Xiu still felt that something was amiss. It wasn't because there was danger, but because he felt too relaxed. Apart from the final killing trap set up by Gu Qingqing, which the 4 demon sovereigns had worked together to kill him, everything else had been easily taken care of. However, the problem was that they were facing a life spirit. It was Dugu Weiwei's life spirit. How could they have set up such a simple trap? Before Chu Xiu could think of anything else, the Daoist sovereign said, "Everyone, the experts and demons in the Yellow Springs heaven have all been killed by us. Let's not waste any more time. Let's seal the passageway to the Yellow Springs heaven as soon as possible." Hearing the Daoist sovereign's words, Chu Xiu could only put aside his suspicions for the time being. The many martial immortals went to the South Sea to prepare to seal the passageway. When they arrived at the South Sea, there was indeed not a single demon in the Yellow Springs heaven. There were only palaces of bones there. Sealing the passageway required setting up a formation. Only the Daoist sovereign and Meng Xinghe could intervene. However, when the two of them looked at the passageway, their expressions grew more and more grave. "What's wrong? Is there a problem with the passageway?" Chu Xiu asked. The Daoist sovereign shook his head and said, "There's no problem with the passageway. The problem lies with us. With our current strength, we cannot close the passageway." Hearing that, Chu Xiu frowned. "Why is that? In the past, you were able to set up a formation that separated the Daoyu Ocean from the lower realm, so why can't you close this passage?" Meng Xinghe explained with a bitter smile, "It's not the same. Although the Daoyu Ocean's Yuan Qi is different from that of the lower realm, the laws of the world are exactly the same. Therefore, our Dao of formations can be used in both the Daoyu Ocean and the lower realm. But in a place like Yellow Springs Heaven, the power system and rules are different from the lower realms and the Daoyu Ocean, so we have no way of understanding it. Even if we were given time to understand the power of Netherworld Heaven, it wouldn't be enough. With our current strength, we can't completely seal this passage. We can only build a large formation on both sides to separate the two places, just like we did when we entered the Daoyu Ocean continent. This method was only temporary, so someone needed to take the initiative to maintain the formation, just like the Heavenly Gate in the lower realm. Therefore, this also meant that someone had to stay in Netherworld Heaven forever to maintain the formation. Moreover, a lot of people were needed to ensure that it could be passed down from generation to generation. But the question was, would anyone be willing to do so? Perhaps after a long time, they would all be assimilated into the people of Netherworld Heaven. It's easy to open this gate, but it's not so easy to close it. Everyone present fell silent. What Meng Xinghe said was the truth. If they wanted to build a large formation like the Heavenly Gate in Netherworld Heaven, who would be willing to go? As for what Netherworld Heaven looked like, one could tell just by looking at the demons from before. It was not a place for people to stay at. Even if someone was righteous in the face of a great calamity and was willing to take the initiative to guard Netherworld Heaven, after 100 or 1,000 years, when the first generation died, what about the remaining people? The Heavenly Gate was an example. The ancient martial art practitioners of the first generation of the Heavenly Gates had indeed protected the lower realm with the determination to die. However, the sect leaders of the next few generations of the Heavenly Gates basically had nothing to do with the sect leader of the first generation of the Heavenly Gates. The goals of both parties had completely diverged. Even the Heavenly Gate in the lower realm had such a change, let alone Netherworld Heaven. At that moment, everyone suddenly felt an abnormal surge on the surface of the sea. It was as if something huge was surging towards them. Everyone subconsciously looked in the direction of the surging force, and everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They saw a huge mountain floating on the surface of the sea in the distance, moving toward them. However, when they looked carefully, they discovered that this mountain was not floating on the surface of the sea. Instead, a person was holding the mountain with one hand and walking toward them. However, because the mountain was too heavy, the person walked on the sea. Every step he took set off waves on the surface of the sea. The existence that was lifting the mountain was Wuxia Xianxia, who had not been seen for a long time. The eyes of Dao Master and the others revealed a dignified look. Previously, Wuxia Xianxia had made a move. They had thought that Wuxia Xianxia was strong enough, but now they knew that it was far from Wuxia Xianxia's true strength. With the strength of Dao Master and the others, it would not be a problem for them to shatter such a tall mountain. However, if they wanted to lift it like this, they would have to distribute all their strength into the mountain. This required an extremely majestic foundation of power and strong control. Otherwise, if they wanted to lift the mountain, they would most likely have to drill a hole in the mountain. But Chu Xiu's attention was not on this, but on the mountain. The power of the mountain was a bit strange. It appeared to be a deathly gray color, and it was bare without any plants or living creatures. Its aura actually gave Chu Xiu a very strange feeling. That was, this mountain did not exist in this world. When Wuxia Xianxia came close, he looked at everyone present and said lightly, "Please make way." Dao Master asked cautiously, "May I ask what your excellency wants to do?" Zhong Xianxia glanced at him and said lightly, "The passage you created has destroyed the karma of the lower realm. I can't seal it, so I can only drag this mountain over and suppress it." The expressions of Dao Master and the others were a bit unnatural. They still thought that the appearance of Yellow Springs Heaven was their responsibility. Everyone made way, and they saw Zhong Xianxia smash the huge mountain towards the passage. The white bone palaces all shattered the instant the mountain fell, and the passage was completely covered by the mountain. Zhong Xianxia's third eye opened, and the light of primal chaos completely enveloped the mountain, as if it was refining it. In the end, the mountain was shrouded by a hazy aura, as if it was an island erected on the endless sea. No one could feel the aura of Yellow Springs Heaven anymore. Seeing this, Dao Master and the others all breathed a sigh of relief. The passage to Yellow Springs Heaven was sealed, and they finally did not have to worry about it anymore. Compared to the great calamity 10,000 years ago, they were much more relaxed this time. But at that moment, on the distant sea surface, over a dozen people rode the waves. They were not martial immortals, but they were not weak either. Among those people, the leader was Lu Sanjin, and the others were also people from the Imperial Sky Pavilion. This stunned Chu Xiu. Lu Sanjin did not participate in this battle. Zhong Qiushui deliberately did not let him participate. Everyone knew the danger of this battle. If anything happened, Lu Sanjin could leave a seed for the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Therefore, not only did Lu Sanjin not participate, but he also stayed in the Daoist. What did he mean by appearing here now? Zhong Qiushui stood up and asked, "Why are you here? Did something happen to the Imperial Sky Pavilion?" Lu Sanjin said anxiously, "It's not the Imperial Sky Pavilion that has a problem, it's the entire Daoist. While you were attacking, several spatial rifts appeared in Exalted Heaven, and experts from Yellow Springs Heaven descended from them. Although there were no 9th layer heaven existences, there were several 8th layer heaven existences. The Daoist experts have all been taken away. Only the primordial ultimate god, the leader of the previous generation of prime venerables, and 2 prime venerables who were unwilling to descend to the Daoist were left. However, the primordial ultimate god was so old that he could no longer fight. His vitality had begun to dissipate a long time ago. At that moment, he was besieged by 3 8th heaven experts from Yellow Springs Heaven and died after killing one of them. The other 2 prime venerables were only at the 3rd heaven and were also brutally killed. Currently, the only martial immortal in the Daoist was Sky Devil Palace Master Wuxia. He was using Sky Devil Palace's geographical advantage to contend with them, but the situation was not optimistic. Although he was not in trouble when I left, the odds are against him. Everyone's expression changed when they heard Lu Sanjin's words. Although the Daoist warriors were all in the lower realm, the Daoist was their foundation. They were working so hard to resist the arrival of Yellow Springs Heaven because they knew that the teeth would be interdependent if the lips were gone. If they sat back and watched Yellow Springs Heaven occupy the lower realm, the Daoist would be next. That was why they were working so hard to completely block Yellow Springs Heaven from the lower realm. They did not expect Yellow Springs Heaven to play such a trick, attracting their attention to the lower realm while the rest of their forces appeared in the Daoist. However, the Dao Masters and the others did not understand how Yellow Springs Heaven opened the entrance to the lower realm. How did Yellow Springs Heaven open the entrance to the Daoist? Chu Xiu breathed a sigh of relief. His previous worries had finally become a reality. After knowing what had happened to the Daoist, Chu Xiu finally knew why he felt something was wrong before. Because they had won too easily this time. Yellow Springs Heaven should not be so weak, or the arrangement of their life spirits should not be so sloppy. The gazes of Chu Xiu and the others were focused on the 4 great demon sovereigns as well as the Sword Saint and Sword Emperor. However, 500 years ago, there were many experts in the pugilistic world, and there were as many experts as there were clouds in the sky. Although they were not as outstanding as these few people, they should not be too weak. For example, the sect master of Chunyang Dao sect 500 years ago, the sect master of Sword King City 500 years ago, and so on. Even the demon envoys and hall masters of the Kunlun devil cult were there, but now they were all gone. Perhaps the real goal of the life spirits was not the lower realm, but the Daoist. Chapter 1467. The Daoist situation made Chu Xiu feel that it was a little dangerous. Previously, Chu Xiu had always felt that he was in control of everything, uniting everyone to kill the netherworld heaven and so on. However, in the end, they were still the passive ones. Lord Taixian and the others immediately wanted to return to the Daoist to help. There was no existence of the ninth heaven there, so they still had a chance. However, Chu Xiu looked at Lu Sanjin and asked in a deep voice, "What were the people in the netherworld heaven doing when you left? Is it just a simple murder?" Lu Sanjin shook his head and said, "They weren't killing people, but they attacked the dragon veins of the north, south, east and west respectively. They opened the dragon veins and absorbed the power within. The dragon vein of the south region is in the demonic palace, so the demonic palace became the target. Otherwise, palace lords Wuxia Xianxia couldn't move or take the initiative to attack." Chu Xiu nodded and sighed. He looked at Tianhun and said, "It's too late. He should be back after absorbing enough power of the dragon vein." Tianhun also nodded and said, "It's indeed too late. Previously, he sent people to secretly absorb the power of the dragon vein in the mortal world, but you discovered it. Now, he has attacked the Daoist with great fanfare, and the strength of the dragon vein in the Daoist is far stronger than that in the mortal world. Even if we rush back now, it's useless. What did the life soul in the netherworld heaven need?" Previously, Chu Xiu didn't understand, but after deducing many clues and Meng Xinghe's research, Chu Xiu almost understood. The netherworld heaven was the yin side, while the mortal world and the Daoist were the yang side. Over the past 500 years, the life soul itself might have been assimilated by the netherworld heaven, so it was easy to enter the netherworld heaven, but difficult to leave. If the life soul wanted to appear on the yang side, it naturally needed the power of the yang side. Where was the place with the densest power of the yang side? It was in the dragon vein. Since the other party had put everything on the line and released all his power, it was obvious that he had absorbed enough power this time. The World Lord frowned and said, "You two, who are you talking about? Who was coming back? It's not that this penniless monk is being paranoid, but this penniless monk has long felt that something was amiss. Although the yellow spring sky was opened by us, why do I feel that your understanding of the yellow spring sky is even greater than ours?" At this point, there was no need for Chu Xiu or Tianhun to hide. Furthermore, they still had to face the life soul. The moment the life soul appeared, they would know without any explanation. So Tianhun sneered and said, "Who's back?" "Of course, Dugu Weiwei is coming back." Everyone was stunned. The world-honored one asked in confusion, "Aren't you Dugu Weiwei?" Tianhun calmly said, "I am, and so is he. To be more precise, he is more than I am. Monk, your ancestors were too simple-minded. Do you really think you can seal a person who can't even be killed? Do you really think that you defeated Dugu Weiwei and sealed him 500 years ago? You guys are too simplistic. Daoist, do you still remember the soul-splitting technique left by the Three Pristines Temple in the mortal world? Maybe the Three Pristines Temple doesn't even know it now, right? The Devil Lord is undefeated. Although he didn't win, he didn't lose either. The ninth heaven powerhouses present were not idiots. Since Tianhun had already said it so bluntly, they certainly knew what was going on. In an instant, the three of them looked at Chu Xiu and Tianhun with vigilance. The old barbarian king was puzzled. He had only heard of the various disturbances 500 years ago, but he really didn't know the details. The World Lord coldly said, "The heaven and earth souls are always outside, but only the life soul is in the body. Since the one in the yellow spring sky is more than Dugu Weiwei, then you are the heaven and earth souls?" Tianhun calmly said, "Don't be so vigilant. I was just once. Your Three Pristines Temple has done a lot of research on primordial spirit and soul. For example, if a person's divided soul can't share consciousness with another divided soul, or even give birth to a separate consciousness, then is he a divided soul or a separate living creature? Look at Chu Xiu. Does he have a trace of Dugu Weiwei's aura? You don't want to see the yellow spring sky descend, and we also don't want to see Dugu Weiwei descend again. You don't want to die, but we don't want to die either. What should we do now? After a long silence, the World Lord suddenly asked. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Fight. Gather all our strength and fight. At this time, there is no other way but to fight." Hearing this, the World Lord immediately turned his gaze to Xianxia, put his palms together, and said in a deep voice, "Can you help us this time?" Dugu Weiwei came from the yellow spring sky. Looking at the demons he created, we know that he is no longer a human. When he descends, he will definitely bring disaster to both the upper and lower realms. Xianxia said indifferently, "His appearance has completely disrupted the rules of karma. I will take action, but I can't beat him." Everyone present was stunned. Xianxia was extremely mysterious in the eyes of Chu Xiu, the World Lord, and the others. Who would have thought that he would say so bluntly that he couldn't beat Dugu Weiwei? You have never seen Dugu Weiwei. How do you know that you can't beat him? The World Lord asked doubtfully. Xianxia said, "I have seen him." Chu Xiu looked at Tianhun, who shook his head. Obviously, he couldn't find any memories of Xianxia in his memories. Xianxia said indifferently, "I can't beat an existence that transcends karma. Even if I can beat him temporarily, I won't be able to beat him in the future." As he said this, Xianxia pointed to Chu Xiu and Tianhun. You are all existences that transcend karma, and so is the life soul. There is also the Daoist priest of the Eastern Sea. He is half of one. By the way, there is also Senior Ning Xuanji. The World Lord looked at Chu Xiu. Cult Master Chu, Senior Ning Xuanji left with him. Do you know where Senior Ning Xuanji went? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Although I know where Senior Ning Xuanji went, I can't guarantee that Senior Ning Xuanji won't intervene in this matter. The realm he's pursuing has already surpassed our imagination. It's even beyond the karma of our world. Ning Xuanji was the same as Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago. What he pursued was true detachment on the martial Tao. Even Ning Xuanji wanted to create his own world and call himself a god. He had a big heart. The grievances of the Jianghu in the lower realm, even if it involved the true martial sect, Chu Xiu wasn't sure if Ning Xuanji would intervene. The most important thing was that when Chu Xiu left last time, Ning Xuanji was experiencing the scene of the fusion of the two realms. He hadn't appeared yet, so he should be in a state of seclusion. If Chu Xiu disturbed him at this time, it wouldn't be good. It would be interesting if he angered Ning Xuanji. At this time, Lu Changlu, who was in the distance, suddenly said, "Cult Master Chu, you can give it a try." Although I haven't been in contact with the Patriarch as long as Cult Master Chu, I know from the ancient books left by the ancestors that the Patriarch is actually a person with a cold face but a warm heart. The Dao sect is quiet and doesn't like to meddle in other people's business, but it doesn't mean that they won't care even if the sky falls. Cult Master Chu, you just need to tell the Patriarch about the current situation. There's no need to persuade him. Let Patriarch Ning Xuanji choose for himself. Chu Xiu thought about it and said, "All right, I'll make a trip to the East Sea. I'll try to return as soon as possible. Although it's already late for the Daoyu Ocean, I'll try my best to eliminate all the existences in Netherworld Heaven. I'll leave this to you guys." Time waited for no man. After making the arrangements, Chu Xiu immediately headed for the East Sea according to the direction in his memory. Because time was too tight, Chu Xiu didn't waste any energy this time. Instead, he was surrounded by the yin and yang source energy and directly broke the void with absolute power as he moved forward. When he reached the depths of the East Sea, where the upper realm and lower realm merged, Chu Xiu had almost exhausted all his energy. Previously, Chu Xiu thought that Ning Xuanji was in seclusion, but who would have thought that he was sitting in front of the place where the two realms merged with a contemplative look on his face. Seeing Chu Xiu coming, Ning Xuanji raised his eyebrows and asked, "Kid, did something happen in the lower realm?" "Senior, you know about it?" Ning Xuanji sneered and pointed to the sky. How could I not know about such a big commotion? But those Daoist guys are also in the lower realm, so they shouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Now that you've come to find me, could it be that there's something that can't be resolved? Logically speaking, it shouldn't be. Chu Xiu coughed. There are indeed some things that can't be resolved, but it's not the lower realm, it's the Daoist. After saying that, Chu Xiu didn't hide anything from Ning Xuanji and told him everything. After listening, Ning Xuanji's expression gradually turned strange. After a moment of silence, Ning Xuanji suddenly cursed, "Damn it. I've been fooled by that old brat, Dugu Weiwei." Ning Xuanji and Dugu Weiwei might not have fought for their entire lives, but it could be said that they had been fighting for half of their lives. Previously, he had always thought that Dugu Weiwei was really stubborn. In the lower realm, he had the final say. In the Daoist, he was even more domineering. Hence, he was beaten up by the crowd. In the end, who would have thought that it was all an illusion? Dugu Weiwei's calculations were even deeper than his. This made Ning Xuanji suddenly feel ashamed that his intelligence had been suppressed. Even Ning Xuanji's gaze towards Chu Xiu was a little unfriendly. Because in a sense, Chu Xiu could also be said to be a part of Dugu Weiwei. In the end, Ning Xuanji snorted coldly and said, "Kid, give me a reason to make a move. You should know that although Dugu Weiwei and I are opponents, we can't be considered enemies. Now that he wants to come back and walk his own path, there's no need for me to stop him. The grudges between you and him are also your business. Why should I interfere in your internal strife?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Netherworld heaven is the yin side, and the world we live in is the yang side. Now that the life soul has extracted a part of the lower realm and a part of the Daoist dragon vein's power into Netherworld heaven, it has caused the yin and yang to deviate from the division. I don't know what the consequences will be, but if I let the life soul walk its own path, the final result might be that everyone has nowhere to go. The choice is yours, Senior Ning. If you don't want to interfere, I'll immediately retreat and go to the Daoist to fight the life soul." Chapter 1468. Ning Xuanji asked Chu Xiu to give him a reason, but now Chu Xiu threw the choice to Ning Xuanji again. Ning Xuanji was silent for a while. Suddenly, he pointed to the place where the upper and lower mortal heavens converged and said, "Actually, I've already discovered the existence of Netherworld heaven." Chu Xiu was stunned. "Discovered?" "I've studied the place where the upper and lower mortal heavens converge for a long time. I've gained something, but not much. But I found something in it. Some small cracks that can lead to Netherworld heaven, pointing directly to the source of Netherworld heaven. I wanted to enter it with my soul, but I found that someone's soul had refined its source, so it rejected all external existences. Since you're Dugu Weiwei's earth soul, the core of your soul should be the same as Dugu Weiwei's. Since that's the case, you can try to enter the interior of Netherworld heaven and see what's in its source. Of course, there are risks. After all, I didn't successfully enter. I don't know what's inside, and I don't know if Dugu Weiwei will notice. But know yourself and know your enemy. I feel that I should gain something if I enter. It's up to you whether you want to go or not. I'll go with you and meet this old friend of mine, Dugu Wei." Chu Xiu pondered for a moment and said, "I'll go. Senior Ning, please show me the way." Although Chu Xiu's strength had reached the peak of the ninth heaven and he had fused with luck, he had taken a different path from all the other martial immortals. It could be said to be unprecedented. But he still didn't have absolute confidence in defeating the life soul. Since there was no way to improve his strength again, he could only find a way to see how much power the life soul had mastered. Ning Xuanji nodded and tore apart the chaotic rules with Chu Xiu. He pointed to the deepest place that emitted netherworld yin qi and said, "That's it. The crack is too small. The physical body can't enter it. Only the soul can." Chu Xiu nodded. He closed his eyes and formed a seal. In the next moment, his primordial spirit left his body and entered the yellow spring sky rift. The boundless yin qi of the netherworld enveloped Chu Xiu, but strangely, it didn't hurt Chu Xiu. It was just as Ning Xuanji had said. Chu Xiu could come and go as he pleased in netherworld heaven. As far as the eye could see, everywhere Chu Xiu's gaze passed, there was a yellow spring sea of blood, and countless vengeful souls and evil spirits were wailing in it. Here, Chu Xiu felt the true deathly stillness, a deathly stillness without any signs of life. The power rule of life and death did not seem to be effective in Yellow Springs heaven. Here, death intent was still death intent at its peak. There was only nirvana and no hope. Carefully bypassing everything, Chu Xiu's soul kept sinking into the Yellow Springs blood sea. He wanted to find out where the true origin power of the Yellow Springs blood sea lay. This kind of behavior was actually very dangerous. If Dugu Weiwei found out, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape in such a place. However, there seemed to be a very strange feeling in Yellow Springs heaven, attracting Chu Xiu to keep exploring. Originally, Chu Xiu thought that the bottom of the Yellow Springs blood sea would be extremely terrifying, but who knew that the scene at the bottom was somewhat beyond Chu Xiu's expectations. What appeared in front of Chu Xiu was actually a mirror. It was a mirror that seemed to have existed since the birth of the 5 heavenly realms. It reflected everything in the other worlds, yin and yang, life and death. It was as if everything that was born at the beginning of the world could be seen here. Among the 5 heavenly realms, the Daoist was invaded by the cultivators of the lower realm 10,000 years ago. It was no longer the original Daoist. Longevity heaven was just a legend. The upper realm had been destroyed and the lower realm had been merged. The only place that could maintain its original state was this Yellow Springs heaven, which was filled with yin qi of the Yellow Springs and had no signs of life. This place happened to be a place that wasn't affected. Yellow Springs heaven was a mirror. It reflected many things that Chu Xiu didn't know before. This made him understand a lot in an instant. He even saw a figure in the mirror, a figure that he was very familiar with. Immediately, a smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. It was a smile that Lu Jianghe, Lu Fengxian, and the others were very familiar with. It was a smile that Chu Xiu would often show after he succeeded in scheming against others. He finally understood. The next moment, there was a tremor in Yellow Springs heaven. It was as if a pair of eyes was scanning the Yellow Springs blood sea. With a thought, Chu Xiu's primordial spirit seemed to have undergone some kind of change. Its aura became extremely similar to those ghosts in Yellow Springs heaven. He calmly retreated. In the outside world, Ning Xuanji rubbed his chin and waited. There was no movement for a long time. Could this kid have been swallowed by Dugu Weiwei? That couldn't be right. If he had been swallowed, then his body should have been completely lifeless by now. At this moment, Chu Xiu's figure moved, and his primordial spirit completely returned to its original position. However, Ning Xuanji suddenly had a very strange feeling. Although the current Chu Xiu and Chu Xiu's strength had not changed, the aura on his body had a very strange feeling. Even Ning Xuanji couldn't describe it. Did you find anything in it? Chu Xiu nodded and said, I found a lot of things. Senior Ning, let's go. With that, Chu Xiu and Ning Xuanji headed straight for the entrance of the Daoist passage. At this time, in the Daoist southern territory, outside the Heavenly Devil Palace. The originally magnificent Heavenly Devil Palace had been completely destroyed. It was like a piece of scorched earth. Zhuoqiuliang was on the verge of death, but the good news was that the Heavenly Devil Palace had unexpectedly shattered during the fierce battle. The impact of its power had cut off his connection with the Heavenly Devil Palace, so that he wouldn't be trapped in the Heavenly Devil Palace for the rest of his life. Several ninth heaven powerhouses from the lower realm had returned to the Daoist continent and easily extinguished the netherworld heaven powerhouses in the Daoist continent. However, looking at the huge spatial crack above the Heavenly Devil Palace, which was still continuously absorbing the power of the dragon vein, everyone was at their wits' end. The world sovereign said to Zhongshanxiu, Does your excellency have any way to pull a few more mountains and completely suppress it? Zhongshanxiu shook her head and said, It's too late. He is already coming. As Zhongshanxiu's voice fell, the huge spatial crack above the Heavenly Devil Palace continued to expand. It was like a door, and a huge pressure faintly came out from it. The world's sovereign said to Meng Xinghe in a deep voice, "Dean Meng, take out the heavenly cycle stellar array of your Xinghe loose cultivator and integrate it with the 3 primordial chaos array of my 3 pristine palace. I will control it." Meng Xinghe hesitated for a moment before nodding. The heavenly cycle stellar array was the inheritance array of his Xinghe loose cultivator. It could be said to be his final trump card. Some of the array patterns had been lost, and as long as they were damaged, there was no way to repair them. But in this situation, he could only take out all his trump cards. But why did the world's sovereign want to control the array? Although Meng Xinghe knew that he was definitely inferior to the world's sovereign in terms of martial arts, he did not think that he was weaker than the world's sovereign in terms of array Dao. Before Meng Xinghe could think too much, a rich netherworld yin qi had already erupted from the spatial crack. In an instant, the entire sky seemed to have been splashed with ink, and it was dyed pitch black. There were no angry howls of vengeful spirits or roars of evil spirits as he had imagined. The entire world was incomparably silent, as if time had frozen at this moment. The next moment, a figure stepped out of the crack. He was dressed in black, and although he looked exactly like Tianhun, his eyes were extremely cold, like the cold netherworld blood sea. As he stepped into the Daoist land, the netherworld blood sea emerged under his feet, and the white bones paved the way for him. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on that person. Now, everyone finally understood why Tianhun and Chu Xiu looked as if they were facing a formidable enemy when the life spirit was mentioned. Chu Xiu was not the Dugu Weiwei from 500 years ago. Although Tianhuan's appearance was very imposing, he was also not the Dugu Weiwei from 500 years ago. It was only when the life spirit appeared that the world's sovereign and the others were convinced that the existence in front of them was the same person described in the ancient books of their sect, the one who had almost overturned the entire Daoist 500 years ago. The life spirit looked at the crowd below, but it directly skipped over the world's sovereign and the others, focusing its eyes on Tianhun. "Are you here to stop me? You should know that you won't be able to stop me. I know everything that you know. I know everything that I know, but you don't. Looking at you, your strength hasn't even recovered to the peak 500 years ago. How are you going to stop me? Or are you going to rely on the ants around you?" Tianhun snorted coldly. "On myself. Do it." As Tianhuan's voice fell, the boundless demonic qi around him condensed in mid-air, like dark clouds gathering, but it formed the shape of a towering palace. "Suppress." With one word, the huge demonic palace smashed downwards. The rules were sealed, and only the surging demonic qi was left. The Demon Suppression Palace? Using the boundless demonic qi to form a small world to suppress is actually just an upgrade of the domain. Are you still using it? The life spirit stretched out a finger and pointed lightly. The towering Demon Suppression Palace began to collapse, and the demonic qi quickly turned into the netherworld qi. The world's sovereign chanted the name of Buddha and displayed the indestructible golden body. The Mahavarokana Dharma gathered behind him, and the blazing great sun true fire burned fiercely, like a candle flame in the pitch-black night. However, the next moment, the boundless netherworld qi surged over and extinguished the great sun true fire in an instant. A bone spear stained with blood appeared in the void, passing through space and time. It directly pierced through the chest of the world's sovereign and nailed him to the ground. The so-called indestructible golden body, the so-called supreme body refining technique of the Buddhist sect, was like a joke in the hands of the life spirit. It was easily pierced through like a piece of paper. The world's sovereign's body glowed with Buddha light as he forcefully pulled the bone spear out of his chest. With his vitality, he wouldn't die even if his heart was pierced through. However, the yellow springs yin qi remained on his wounds, preventing them from healing. Chapter 1469. An existence at the peak of the 9th layer of the heavens like the world's sovereign was a supreme existence for the other Daoist martial artists. The powerhouses of the 9th layer of the heavens had indeed fallen in battle before, just like when Chu Xiu had killed the Brahmin sect leader. But this time was different. The world's sovereign had been so casually nailed to the ground by the life soul, as if he was facing an ant. This huge gap in strength was simply incomprehensible to them. But even if they didn't understand and feared, they had no choice but to attack. The old barbarian king looked up to the sky and roared. Formidable power gathered around his body, and his whole body was like a black hole, constantly swallowing all the power around him. Even a part of the Yellow Springs Yin Qi was swallowed into his body. This power evolved into a huge demonic god body, which was somewhat similar to Chu Xiu's heaven and earth law phenomenon. The fist smashed down, and the extreme power of the rules caused the void to tremble. At the same time, Meng Xinghe's hands formed a seal, and tens of thousands of starlight rays came over. In his hands, these tens of thousands of starlight rays each carried a different type of power. They turned into a sky full of swords that shrouded the life soul. The Heavenly Sovereign also activated the Heavenly Cycle Stellar Array and the Three Pure Immemorial Array at the same time. The starlight and Daoist power that filled the sky all rushed toward the life soul. Zhong Xinxiu stood in the back, and the third eye between her eyebrows bloomed with boundless chaotic brilliance, which directly penetrated the life soul. At the same time, the boundless demonic energy in the Heavenly Sovereign's hand turned into a long blade, which slashed down. A bright moon appeared in midair, and an extreme sharpness descended. The clouds parted, the moon shone brightly, and the clear sky reflected the shadow. The power of these people's all-out attack could even shatter a domain in the Daoist world. But when it came to the life soul, it was as if it was an understatement. It simply couldn't cause too much damage to him. In the boundless Yellow Springs Blood Sea, a huge and ferocious white-boned demonic god emerged. It met the old barbarian king's fist, and the old barbarian king was blasted back. The sky full of Yellow Springs blood rain fell, completely extinguishing Meng Xinghe's tens of thousands of starlight rays. The power of the Heavenly Cycle Stellar Array and the Three Clear Primordial Chaos Array made him feel slightly troubled. However, as the life spirit's hand formed a seal, the white bones piled up like a mountain under the Yellow Springs Blood Sea and turned into a large array. The Yin Qi of the Yellow Springs lingered around and rotated, resisting the two arrays with the power of one array. When the chaotic brilliance of Zhong Xinxiu's body approached, the Fate Soul's eyes revealed a look of surprise. This power doesn't belong to this world, but it's still useless. The life spirit's eyes instantly turned pitch black, turning into an extreme death intent that roared out of his eyes, blocking the chaotic brilliance from the outside world. At this time, the power of the clear sky illuminating shadow had already fallen, but it did not destroy the physical body of the life spirit. It was unknown when layers of white bone armor had appeared on his body. When the power of the clear sky illuminating shadow landed on the white bone armor, it was actually unable to slash at his physical body. It only caused the white bone armor to shatter. The clear sky illuminating shadow can slash the physical body, but it cannot slash the primordial spirit. This is its only flaw. So, in Yellow Springs Heaven, I researched a saber technique to slay the nascent soul. Blood Sea Reflection. A slender bone saber had appeared in the hands of the life spirit. It was slender and sharp, as if it was the rib of some unknown creature. As the life spirit slashed down, endless amounts of Yellow Springs blood gathered in mid-air, reflecting the appearance of the heavenly soul, but it was a golden primordial spirit. In the next moment, the invisible blade had already torn apart the heavenly soul's primordial spirit, causing him to groan. The heavenly soul furiously formed a seal with his hands, and his primordial spirit began to burn wildly. However, the burning of the primordial spirit only lasted for a moment. In exchange, the power directly cut off a part of his primordial spirit, allowing the blood sea reflection to pull at it. The torn primordial spirit also began to burn fiercely. In the end, it turned into a glittering primordial spirit arrow. As the heavenly soul drew the bow and arrow, it shot straight at the life spirit. At the same time, he condensed demonic energy in his hands and turned it into a world-destroying arrow. He shot it at the life spirit again. The primordial spirit and the powerful world-destroying demonic energy converged into an arrow, increasing its power by 30%. The boundless netherworld blood sea surged wildly in front of the life spirit. It seemed to have divided the world into another world. The arrow formed by the world-destroying demonic energy was completely lost in the sea until its power dissipated. However, the primordial spirit was not obstructed and crashed into the life spirit's body, causing him to groan. However, it was obvious that he was not badly injured. The life spirit had cultivated in Yellow Springs Heaven for 500 years. Now, his power and the strength of his primordial spirit were not something that the heavenly soul could imagine. At that moment, the world was chanting the name of Buddha. Countless Sanskrit words condensed around him to form a string of prayer beads. Every prayer bead was condensed from a rule that was close to the power of the Buddhist sect and emitted a supreme light. A series of prayer beads fell towards the life spirit. However, in the next moment, the life spirit pinched them in his hand and instantly shattered them. "Monk, you're very annoying." The life spirit looked at the world. The boundless netherworld blood sea flowed in his eyes, as if it was a reflection in the world's heart. Instantly, countless evil thoughts filled the world's heart, polluting his Buddhist heart. The inner demons entered his body, making him feel as if all his thoughts were about to be destroyed by the inner demons. Puff! The world burned his primordial spirit and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He paid the price of self-harm in exchange for getting rid of the evil thoughts completely. However, at that moment, a blood-stained bone spear appeared in front of him, freezing time and space. This time, the bone spear was not aimed at the world's heart but at his head. Just as the world was prepared to burn his blood essence and primordial spirit to resist with all his might, a beam of light formed by the power of yin and yang pierced through the void. With a loud bang, the bone spear was shattered. Chu Xiao and Ning Xuanji walked through the air. One of them was surrounded by yin and yang energy. Wherever he passed, all the power and the netherworld yin qi retreated. The other was surrounded by strange Tao patterns. They seemed to revolve around yin and yang, the 5 elements, and the power of earth, wind, water, and fire. However, in reality, the attribute of power was constantly changing. It could even assimilate all the surrounding power. Seeing that Chu Xiao and Ning Xuanji had arrived, everyone present heaved a sigh of relief. "You want to stop me too? Everyone is here today." Ning Xuanji stared at the life spirit and said with a frown, "Dugu Weiwei, why did you turn me into this? You're not the same as you were 500 years ago." The life spirit said calmly, 500 years is enough to change many things. You don't know the true meaning of life and death, but I understand it now. You've been looking for longevity heaven for so long, but you don't know that longevity heaven is right beside you. Ning Xuanji still wanted to say something, but at that moment, the heavenly soul's body burned with endless demonic flames. He shouted, "Everyone, attack! Don't give him time to delay. He has already controlled the power of the entire netherworld heaven." As the heavenly soul's voice fell, the demonic flames around him turned into countless demonic shadows that stood in the air. Each of them looked like a heavenly soul, and they used different demonic secret techniques to attack the life spirit. The heavenly demons were formless, and all techniques were formless. This was almost the most powerful demonic divine ability that Dugu Weiwei had mastered 500 years ago. The life spirit looked at all this coldly. He pinched a seal with his hand, and the spatial crack behind him began to expand without limit. In the end, the white bone throne under him emerged, and what appeared in front of everyone was the entire world. The boundless netherworld blood sea poured down, and the yin qi of the netherworld completely filled the entire space. If this continued for a long time, it would spread to the entire southern region, and even the entire Daoist Ocean. Countless ferocious demons and ghosts also appeared in front of everyone along with the netherworld blood sea, roaring. The netherworld heaven had descended. The life spirit had actually controlled a world with its own power. Even the most powerful cultivators of the 9th heaven could not resist this level of power. Even the Tao Master, the world's sovereign, the old barbarian king, and Meng Xinghe could only protect themselves even if they unleashed all their power. They could not fight against the life spirit. The only ones who were qualified to fight against the life spirit in the netherworld blood sea were Heavenly Soul, Chu Xiao, Ning Xuanji, and Zhong Shenxiu. The power of Heavenly Soul's 10,000 demons came toward the netherworld blood sea. Ning Xuanji's body was surrounded by countless Dao connotation and rules. As he gently pointed, it seemed as if he had opened up a separate world. Even the power of the netherworld blood sea could not submerge it. The small world went straight for the life spirit. Zhong Xinxiu's third eye bloomed with a chaotic brilliance. This time, it evolved into a giant chaotic sword that slashed toward the life spirit. Boundless sword chi. Chu Xiu was the last to make a move. He did not hold a saber. Yin and Yang Qi lingered in his hands, forming an extremely sharp long saber. With one slash, Yin and Yang were split apart, and the world was shattered. With this slash, Chu Xiu actually slashed out the legendary heaven-splitting charm. Even Heavenly Soul couldn't help but look at Chu Xiu. This kind of power was no longer something that the Yin and Yang origin could give to Chu Xiu. He had only gone to the East Sea. What did Ning Xuanji give him to make his strength soar to this level? The four of them attacked together. The power that each of them controlled almost surpassed the peak power of this world. The power of 10,000 demons tore apart the boundless netherworld blood sea, but it was completely extinguished by the Yin Qi of the netherworld with a wave of the life spirit's hand. At this time, Ning Xuanji's small world came crushing over. The life spirit blasted out a punch, drawing the power of the netherworld heaven to suppress it, but the life spirit itself was forced to take a step back. At the same time, Zhong Xinxiu's boundless sword chi had already fallen. Although it was directly shattered by the life spirit's vertical palm as a saber, the chaotic chi contaminated his body and eroded his power. Even the power of the netherworld heaven could not eliminate it for a while. At this time, Chu Xiu's heaven-splitting saber had already slashed down. Whether it was the netherworld heaven or any other world, everything was destroyed by this saber. The boundless netherworld blood sea was split in half by this saber. Even the life spirit was completely cut in half. Dao Master and the others were stunned. Victory? Before they could react, the body that had been split in half was integrated into the netherworld heaven. The life spirit's voice was like a thunderclap, coming from midair. I have merged with the netherworld heaven. If the netherworld heaven is not destroyed, how can you kill me? Chapter 1470. The combined attack from Chu Xiu and the other three seemed to have surpassed the limits of this world's power. But even so, they still failed to kill the other party. The Buddha's heart was as hard as iron, but at this time, he couldn't help but feel a sense of despair. He chanted the scriptures, not knowing if he was doing it for himself or for the entire upper and lower realms. But Chu Xiu and the others didn't show any despair at this time. Instead, the fighting spirit in their eyes exploded. So what if they merged with Yellow Springs Heaven? This was the strength of their life soul, but it was also an opportunity for them. If they were in Yellow Springs Heaven, they might not be able to do anything to the other party. But here, they were Daoist, not Yellow Springs Heaven. The four didn't communicate, but they all thought of this at the same time. Heaven's soul formed a seal with his hands. As a large amount of demonic chi drifted out, it directly evolved into the 10,000 demon domain. At this moment, his body completely turned into the primitive devil cave. No, to be precise, it was a boundless demon domain that was even more powerful and terrifying than the primitive devil cave. Flowing light surrounded Ning Xuanji's hands. As the flowing light scattered, all kinds of power between heaven and earth took root in the entire Yellow Springs blood sea like seeds. Too many things were needed to create a world. Ning Xuanji couldn't control the boundless death intent in the Yellow Springs blood sea. What he controlled was vitality and the operation of the rules of power. Raising his hand, Ning Xuanji directly propped up a world in the Yellow Springs blood sea, a world that had just risen. From the third eye between Zhong Xinxiu's eyebrows, boundless chaos chi burst out. But this chaos chi didn't attack but devoured. The boundless Yellow Springs death chi was devoured by the chaos chi. No matter how hard they struggled, they couldn't break free. In the end, Chu Xiu directly formed a seal with his hands. The power of the two yin and yang origins in his body completely burst out. The power of yin and yang rolled back, and the entire world was dyed black and white. The power of the two extreme yin and yang origins stirred the entire Yellow Springs heaven, recreating the chaos and recreating the world's origin. The power of the four people went straight to the power of origin of Netherworld heaven. The life spirit that was integrated into it let out an unwilling roar, but it could only watch helplessly as the power completely devoured the power of Netherworld heaven. The forces of both sides intertwined in midair, and everyone was already giving it their all. The power of the life soul's primordial soul had completely fused with the Yellow Springs blood sea. The heavenly soul also began to burn its chi, blood, and primordial soul to expand the demon domain. Even Ning Xuanji, who had always appeared indifferent, had a grave expression on his face. A thin layer of sweat had even appeared on his forehead. Although Zhong Shenxiu didn't seem to have changed, the primal chaos divine light in his eyes gradually dimmed. Only Chu Xiu was still pushing the power of yin and yang to the extreme. Two huge yin and yang energies transformed into dragons that tore and strangled each other in the air, extinguishing the power of the Yellow Springs. Chu Xiu did not let go even though his body had already suffered a backlash from the yin-yang force, causing fine cracks to appear on his body. These terrifying energy fluctuations almost shattered the entire void of the southern domain. The world's sovereign and the rest raised their heads, their eyes filled with shock. This level of power was not something that they could interfere with. After an unknown amount of time and space seemed to freeze at that moment. All the power stagnated in midair. The next moment, a powerful and violent force erupted, completely annihilating the entire southern domain. But at the same time, the boundless Yellow Springs blood sea was also completely annihilated. Even the surrounding space channels had been destroyed by this force. Chu Xiu's group of four descended. All of them seemed as though their powers were about to be depleted. The world's sovereign asked, "Has the one in the Yellow Springs heaven been completely dealt with?" Ning Xuanji snorted lightly and said, "Otherwise?" He still made a wrong step. Although he is powerful when he fuses with a world, his strength is built on the foundation of that world. His upper limit is already fixed. Dugu Weiwei has walked a dead end. He has already reached the end of this road. The Dao Master nodded his head in understanding. At this moment, he did something that no one expected. He actually controlled the heavenly cycle stellar array and the three primordial chaos array to envelop Chu Xiu. No one could react to the world's sovereign's action. At this time, the world's sovereign actually attacked Chu Xiu. Was he crazy? Ning Xuanji clearly stood on Chu Xiu's side. With the existence of heavenly soul, even if the world's sovereign took advantage of Chu Xiu's exhaustion and successfully launched a sneak attack, did he think that he could still leave? Moreover, why did he attack Chu Xiu? Could it be that the three primordial palace was going to dominate the upper and lower realms? But did he have the strength to do so? Just at this moment, Chu Xiu, who had been sitting cross-legged on the ground and recovering his strength, suddenly opened his eyes. It was as if he had been prepared for this a long time ago. The power of yin and yang erupted, isolating the formation. "I thought you would wait before making a move. You just finished off the one in the Yellow Springs heaven. Are you already so impatient?" Chu Xiu did not say this to the world's sovereign. Instead, he looked at Heavenly Soul. Everyone present was stunned. What was going on? The two of them had just killed a life soul, and now they were going to fight each other? A look of surprise flashed in Heavenly Soul's eyes. Then, the aura on his body suddenly changed, and his power began to increase. Demonic chi surged into his body, and his power actually increased to the level of Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago, which was comparable to the peak of Dugu Weiwei. At this time, the world's sovereign's sneak attack had failed. He stood silently behind Heavenly Soul. This change was simply dumbfounded. When did the world's sovereign have anything to do with Heavenly Soul? When did you start to realize? Chu Xiu said calmly, "Realize? No, I should say that I never believed you. You were the one who told me about the split of the heaven, earth, and life souls. The life souls are the real Dugu Weiwei. You were also the one who told me that they wanted to devour you and me. Although I did not really believe these things before, I did not doubt them either. Oh, then when did you start to doubt them? Chu Xiu said in a low voice, from the moment I came into contact with everything about the real life souls. You and I are not Dugu Weiwei, but our life souls are not Dugu Weiwei either. 500 years may be able to change a person, but it will not change a person so much. I once asked Lu Jianghu what kind of person Dugu Weiwei was. Although he could not answer, he said that the real Dugu Weiwei would definitely not turn the 4 great demon lords who had always been following him into puppets without consciousness. Using the mark of netherworld heaven to revive a person, if the other party did not obey, they would completely become a puppet. People like Monk Longtu and Hua Nongyu chose to surrender. Why did the 4 great demon lords who were willing to risk their lives for the Kunlun devil cult not surrender? Because they knew that the person in front of them was not the real Dugu Weiwei. The previous heaven master and Gu Qingqing both told me that he was not. Who was he not? Not Dugu Weiwei. When we were fighting with the life souls just now, he never said that he would devour you and me. Instead, you kept saying that and kept putting pressure on me. Tianhun said calmly, but these are just your speculations. Are you so sure that your speculations are right? Chu Xiu pointed to Tao Master and said, and him. In fact, from the moment netherworld heaven was opened, I felt that there was something wrong with Tao Master. It was too much of a coincidence. The location of everlasting heaven was calculated by Tao Master, but it turned out to be netherworld heaven. How could such a coincidence happen? Moreover, I knew Tao Master's character from the 3 Pristines Temple. How could such an extremely strong person be willing to listen to my commands so easily? Even with the pressure of netherworld heaven, it was still somewhat suspicious. Thinking of Tao Master's order to not let others touch Dugu Weiwei's essence and blood, it was even more suspicious. Therefore, when you were not paying attention, I specially sent someone to the Daoist Ocean to ask Qin Baiyuan who had entered the spirit cloud realm in the past 500 years. Although Qin Baiyuan was not the sect master at that time, anyone who entered the spirit cloud realm, including the disciples of High Heaven sect, would be recorded. For so many years, apart from the disciples of High Heaven sect, there were only 2 outsiders who entered the spirit cloud realm. One was me, and the other was Tao Master when he was young. Rather than saying that I am your successor, it would be better to say that Tao Master is your successor. The World Venerable and the others looked at Tao Master in shock. They never thought that Tao Master was related to this matter. Even after descending to the mortal world, Tao Master's series of actions were actually using them. Tao Master sighed and bowed to the World Venerable and the others. Everyone, please don't blame us for our own Master's actions. Although the other things are fake, I believe that Master will lead us to the real everlasting heaven and create a new era. The World Venerable and the others looked a little unhappy. They had been fooled. To be precise, they had been fooled for hundreds of years. Along the way, Tao Master had directly crushed all the Daoist martial artists of the same generation. It was not only because of his amazing talent, but also because he had the guidance of Tianhun. Tianhun shook his head gently. Being trapped in the spirit cloud realm, it is difficult to communicate with the outside world. It is indeed easy to reveal flaws, but these are still just guesses and inferences. Chu Xiu sighed and said, yes, they are all guesses. But I went to netherworld heaven and saw a person in the mirror on the dark side of netherworld heaven. Who? Dugu Weiwei. The World Venerable and the others also looked at Chu Xiu. They also wanted to know, since the life soul was not Dugu Weiwei, and neither was Tianhun or Chu Xiu, then who was it? Even Ning Xuanji couldn't help but ask, could it be that Dugu Weiwei is really dead? A strange look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. Dead? He is not dead, the Devil Lord is not defeated, and no one can kill Dugu Weiwei. Dugu Weiwei had chosen the most extreme path, which was to sever all connections between himself and this world, and completely transcend. You said that in the end, Dugu Weiwei split into 3 souls, but in my opinion, it is not the case. Although the 3 pure palaces chi turning 3 pure ones is strange, to put it bluntly, it does not deserve such a strange effect. You and I should be the cause and effect connection between Dugu Weiwei and this world, the past, the present, and the future. At the same time, it also represents the opportunity that Dugu Weiwei left for the 3 of us. You are in the Daoist Ocean and have the most complete inheritance of Dugu Weiwei's memory. The world thinks that you are Dugu Weiwei, so you are the past. The life soul is in Netherworld Heaven. That is the path that Dugu Weiwei might take after discovering Netherworld Heaven. It represents the present. My memory was completely erased in the reincarnation of time and space. I appeared in the lower realm 500 years later, representing the future in the world of great battles. You represent Dugu Weiwei's past. You should know all these things, but the life soul in Netherworld Heaven does not. Dugu Weiwei has already transcended, and the 3 of us are already independent individuals. There is no need for us to devour each other at all, because even if we really merge, we will not become the real Dugu Weiwei. But before Dugu Weiwei transcended, he had actually given us a chance to reach the peak. The life soul controlled Netherworld Heaven and became the lord of a world. Unfortunately, he went astray. In 500 years, it seemed that he controlled Netherworld Heaven, but in fact, he was also affected by Netherworld Heaven and turned to the dark side. This time, he came to assimilate the Daoist Ocean and the lower realm into Netherworld Heaven and become an alternative, immortal. I am in the lower realm and have the inheritance of the devil cult. If there were no accidents when I came to the Daoist Ocean, would still be the cult leader of the devil cult and rule the entire lower realm. And you've also taken the wrong path. Dugu Weiwei arranged for you to stay in the Daoist Ocean. It seems to be a seal, but with your strength and scheming, it should not be difficult for you to escape, just like how you cultivate a Dao master. If you can cultivate a Dao master, why can't you cultivate many Dao masters to help you escape, and then secretly develop your power to control the entire Daoist Ocean? In the end, you used your prophetic ability to target me and the life soul. It is not the life soul that really wants to devour the 3 souls, but you. Chapter 1471. He understood everything that Chu Xiu had said when he saw everything reflected in the dark mirror in the Netherworld Heaven. Unfortunately, the life spirit in the mirror could not see the mirror. He had been completely assimilated by the Netherworld Heaven. He had taken the wrong path. He could only see himself in the mirror and the deathly silent Netherworld blood sea. However, he still believed that this was the everlasting heaven that he had been pursuing. At this time, Tianhun suddenly laughed. You and I are not Dugu Weiwei, but you and I are very similar to Dugu Weiwei. Even our personalities are very similar. Since you already knew the news, you only revealed it now. Don't you also want to use me to get rid of the life spirit? Everyone is just acting. The only difference is who can act until the end. Chu Xiu said calmly, that person should be me. Because of you, I took the wrong path. Tianhuan's expression instantly became extremely gloomy. Took the wrong path? Why was the path that Dugu Weiwei had arranged for them was correct? Chu Xiu, you disappoint me. Although I lied to you at the beginning, there is one thing that I did not lie to you about. I asked you whether you wanted to be Chu Xiu or Dugu Weiwei. Your answer was that you were only Chu Xiu and could only be Chu Xiu. But now, you want to take the path that he arranged for you. What is the difference between you and Dugu Weiwei's puppet? When Dugu Weiwei cut off our 3 souls, to put it nicely, he completely cut off the karma connection with himself and completely transcended. But to put it bluntly, we are trash. We are a burden. He abandoned our 3 souls like a pair of worn-out shoes, but he is detached from the world. He is no longer in this world or even in the 5 heaven realms. Why should we follow the arrangements that he left behind for the rest of our lives? I told you in the spirit cloud realm that I am not Dugu Weiwei, but the great demon Dugu. As he spoke the last word, the demonic flames behind Tianhun surged into the sky. They replaced the yellow spring's blood sea from before and covered the sky. He had been hiding his strength all along. Chu Xiu gently shook his head and said, I didn't walk the path that Dugu Weiwei arranged for me. I've always been walking my own path. I don't think that the path that Dugu Weiwei arranged for me is right. It's fine if you don't take the path that Dugu Weiwei arranged for you, but you're taking the wrong path. You keep saying that you don't want to be Dugu Weiwei, but in fact, you are the one who cares about this the most. Among the 3 souls, you've been influenced the most by Dugu Weiwei. You haven't walked out of his shadow in the past 500 years. Instead, your state of mind has been twisted. Repent, you still have a chance. Tianhun laughed coldly. Have you become stupid after cultivating too many Buddhist sect techniques? I can obviously reach the peak, so why should I turn back? Do you think that I've been staying in the spirit cloud realm for the past 500 years, hating Dugu Weiwei and hiding in the dark to plot all this? You can't imagine what I've studied. Although devouring the 3 souls can't make me Dugu Weiwei, I can reach the true peak, the peak that the 5 heaven realms can accommodate. As Tianhun's voice fell, he formed a seal with his hands. The yin qi of the netherworld that had been scattered around netherworld heaven surged out and integrated into Tianhun's body. That was the power of netherworld heaven that the life soul had previously controlled. Since you and I are one, after you die, your power will naturally be controlled by me. It's so difficult to kill a life soul that has mastered the power of netherworld heaven. How can you kill me now? Half of Tianhun's body was surrounded by the boundless devil qi that covered the sky, while the other half was the surging netherworld blood sea. At this moment, his power was even more amazing than the life soul. If Chu Xiu died, then the yin and yang origin power that he controlled would also be absorbed by Tianhun without any hindrance. At that time, Tianhun would probably be close to being invincible in the world. Moreover, he would be invincible in the world that could not be defeated by numbers. At the moment, everyone on Chu Xiu's side had exhausted their power, including Ning Xuanji and the others. However, Chu Xiu did not panic at all. He just shook his head gently and said, "Do you really think that my power is the yin and yang origin power? Even if I give you my true power, you won't be able to control it." As Chu Xiu gently drew a line in front of him, a crack in the space opened up. What was revealed was not a pitch-black void, but a scene of the entire human realm. Eastern Qi, Western Chu, and Northern Yen. Countless living beings and creatures in the entire human realm existed within it. As Chu Xiu flipped his hand, the crack in the space opened up like a painting scroll. The mountains, rivers, and earth were all within it, and it shrouded Tianhun. The power to descend to the human realm. When did you master the power to descend to the human realm? You said that you went the wrong way by integrating your life soul into netherworld heaven. Now, you are still the same as your life soul. Tianhun roared in disbelief. Boundless devil qi and the surging netherworld blood sea met the mountains, rivers, and earth. The void seemed to be split into 2 worlds. Chu Xiu said calmly, "Who told you that I control the power to descend to the human realm? To be precise, this is the power of those living beings and people who descend to the human realm. Their luck belongs to me, so I will help them protect the mountains, rivers, and earth." Tianhun's path was wrong because netherworld heaven was the dark side of the world. It was a world without life. A world with living beings was the real world. A dead and silent Yellow Springs heaven would only assimilate him. You think that I control yin and yang, but in fact, I control life and death. Back then, Chu Xiu had stepped into the 9th heaven with the power of destiny and seen all living beings descending to the human realm. He had comprehended the true mystery of the origin of the world, which was the power of life. However, what really made Chu Xiu sublimate was what he had seen in netherworld heaven. It was a mirror that represented the dark side. It was the process of life and death. After so many years, Chu Xiu was the only one who saw the power that represented life and death in this world. Previously, because netherworld heaven was controlled by the life soul and his body had merged with netherworld heaven, Chu Xiu could not compete with him for power. Now that the life soul had died, Tianhun could control this power. Naturally, Chu Xiu could also control it. Although he had not reached a transcendent realm like Dugu Weiwei, he, who had mastered life and death, had reached the peak of the power that Tianhun had said the 5 heaven realms could contain. As Chu Xiu's voice fell, the netherworld blood sea that had been lingering behind Tianhun turned around in an instant. It wrapped around Tianhun along with the mountain river earth god that had descended to the human realm. The power of life and death rotated. Any living being in this world could not transcend it. This was invincible power. Truly invincible. Even if all the warriors in the world attacked together, they could not break through this power. Of course, if they all died, their destiny and vitality would disappear. This meant that Chu Xiu had lost this power. No. Amidst the attack of the power of life and death, Tianhun let out an unwilling roar. After planning for 500 years, he was not willing to be Dugu Weiwei's substitute. He even wanted to surpass him. However, in the end, he realized that everything had been wrong from the beginning. Under the rotation of the power of life and death, Tianhun's body completely dissipated in this world, leaving only a wisp of demonic aura floating around. Chu Xiu flicked his finger gently, and the demonic aura also dissipated between the heaven and the earth. Perhaps after a few decades or centuries, someone would obtain this wisp of demonic aura by chance and embark on the path of a demon master. However, all of this was no longer important. After Dugu Weiwa had transcended, he had returned the power that he had obtained from the 5 great heavenly realms. Returning this strand of demonic chi to this world was where it should go. Everyone present still looked as if they couldn't recover from the shock. But in the end, everyone revealed a bitter smile, including Ning Xuanji. After fighting for 500 years, the so-called Great Tribulation, the so-called world of great battles, was actually just a mess left behind by Dugu Weiwei. Even Ning Xuanji had to admit that although they had fought for half a lifetime, he was not as good as Dugu Weiwei. When Chu Xiu turned to look at Dao Master directly threw the formation to Meng Xinghe and bowed to Chu Xiu indifferently. Cult Master Chu has now reached the peak. My lord has lost, and I have also lost. However, only I know about this. 3 Pure Temple is innocent. I am willing to disperse my cultivation and return to the dust. I only hope that Cult Master Chu can let 3 Pure Temple live. Having seen this level of power, Dao Master could no longer raise any thoughts of resistance. Back then, he was just curious about what the powerhouse who almost overturned the entire Daoist 500 years ago looked like. As a result, he entered the divine cloud realm and embarked on a path of no return. Of course, this path was chosen by Dao Master himself. He had always believed that Heavenly Soul would succeed and bring him to the real peak. Unfortunately, he still lost in the end. Dao Master had already accepted the outcome. Since he had lost, he might as well lose with dignity. At least, he could leave 3 Pure Temple a way out. At this time, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Enough people have died today. It is a pity that you, with your cultivation at the peak of the 9th heaven, will return to the dust at this time. The entrance between the Daoist and the human realm needs to be guarded. You will guard there until you pass away. You will not be allowed to leave this temple for the rest of your life." At Chu Xiu's current realm, he had really taken life and death grudges lightly, or rather, it was no longer necessary. Dao Master lowered his head and bowed deeply to Chu Xiu. "Thank you, Cult Master Chu." At this moment, Xianxia suddenly said, "Since you have reached the peak, you should go to that place to have a look." "What place?" Xianxia said slowly, "Freedom Heaven, or what you call Longevity Heaven." Everyone present was stunned. Longevity Heaven, was there really a Longevity Heaven? Xianxia looked at the crowd and gently shook her head. Longevity Heaven is different from what you think. You can't go in either, but Chu Xiu can. As she spoke, Xianxia looked at Ning Xuanji. "You can too. Then where is Longevity Heaven?" There was only curiosity in Chu Xiu's words, but no desire. At his current realm, he could already see things that many people could not. The so-called longevity did not exist at all. Xianxia's third eye opened, tearing a space portal filled with chaotic qi. "This is Longevity Heaven." As she spoke, Xianxia took the lead and stepped into it. Chu Xiu and Ning Xuanji did not hesitate and followed closely. With Chu Xiu's current strength, there was indeed nothing to fear. However, when he saw Longevity Heaven in front of him, Chu Xiu was still shocked. In his imagination, Longevity Heaven should be a paradise on earth, or rather, it should be said that in everyone's imagination. But in reality, what appeared in front of Chu Xiu was a dead silent world. There was no vitality, not even a drop of water. Grayish-white rocks were everywhere, and occasionally, some dilapidated buildings could be seen. Even the entire Longevity Heaven did not have any elements such as yin and yang, the 5 elements, and so there was not even wind. It was so quiet that it made people panic. Moreover, Chu Xiu also discovered that the mountain that Zhongshanxiu had used to seal the Yellow Springs Heaven should have been dragged out from the Longevity Heaven. This is Longevity Heaven? Zhongshanxiu nodded and said, Longevity Heaven is the beginning of the 5 great celestial realms. This is the place where the real immortals exist. Their lifespans are easily tens of millions of years. The cultivation of martial immortals in Longevity Heaven is just the beginning. Ning Xuanji was dumbfounded and said, then, why did Longevity Heaven become like this? Because there is no restraint. Zhongshanxiu said indifferently, the immortals plundered the luck of the world's mountains and rivers without limit, eventually leading to the decline of the luck of the mountains and rivers. Their longevity was the decline of the everlasting heaven. The final outcome was what it was now. The world had weakened, and all the celestials were connected to this world by karma. None of them could do what Dugu Weiwa did, completely severing their connection with the world. Hence, they all perished together with the Longevity Heaven. The power that overflowed when Longevity Heaven died created the other 4 worlds, but each world is not complete, so there was the Great Ancient Calamity, and the Netherworld Heaven, which is dedicated to containing the Death Qi. Then you are? Chu Xiu looked at Zhongshanxiu with a trace of curiosity. The immortals were already dead, so who was he? I am not a human. Zhongshanxiu pointed to himself and said, I am a living being condensed by the last immortal emperor of Longevity Heaven with the last trace of Longevity Heaven's power to monitor the karma of the other 4 worlds, so that they will not repeat the mistakes of Longevity Heaven. But now, the karma has been completely disturbed. You are the one who has the ability to change the karma of the 3 realms, and Ning Xuanji is half of it. So I brought you here. I can no longer see how the karma of the 3 realms will work in the future. It all depends on your choice. Chu Xiu looked at Ning Xuanji, who waved his hand and said, don't look at me, I don't plan to get involved in the affairs of this world from now on. I don't know if the path I chose is right, but at least I will walk it to the end first. As for you, what are you going to do? Are you going to transcend and go to other worlds like Dugu Weiwei, or continue to stay here? Go to other worlds? Chu Xiu shook his head gently. The world of his previous life might really exist, but to him, it was just a dream. My power comes from this world, where else can I go? Now that both the upper and lower realms are in a mess, I have to sort it out first before thinking about other things. Oh? What are you going to do? Ning Xuanji asked. Chu Xiu pointed to his feet, the example of Longevity Heaven is right in front of us. If we don't control it, I'm afraid that our descendants will really be cut off. So I'm going to reseal the Daoist to balance the power of the upper and lower realms. The same sect can have inheritances in both the upper and lower realms, but the martial artists in the lower realms can only cultivate to the real pellet state at most. Once they break through to the true fire spirit refinement, they must go to the Daoist to cultivate. It can't be a waste for the Dao Lord to guard the portal. He can monitor the ascension of the lower realm martial artists to the Daoist and prevent the Daoist powerhouses from descending to the lower realm. Ning Xuanji nodded and said, Ascension? That's a good idea. By the way, I'm a monk, so why should I care about my descendants? You don't seem to have any descendants, so why are you afraid of losing your descendants? Chu Xiu smiled and said, what if there is one in the future? With that said, Chu Xiu looked at Zhongshanxiu again. What about you? What are you going to do in the future? Zhongshanxiu said, I don't need to monitor the cause and effect anymore, so I'm going to try to be a real person. It's a very painful thing to have too much cause and effect in my head. I can't let myself have any emotions. I have to maintain the balance of cause and effect at all times. There are too many things in my mind, so I often get lost. It should feel good to let go of all this now. Chu Xiu turned his head to look at the deathly still longevity sky. Then, he stepped through the door. Let's go, the world of great battles is over before it starts, but next, it will be a new era. End of the book. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.